Our story begins as Haruka hides near some goblins. Haruka blows his cover by stepping on the smallest branch, so the goblins chase after him. Haruka smiles with utter confidence as he jumps into the air, and all the goblins fall into his trap. Haruka is very pleased with himself, as he is doing a great job surviving alone in another world. A look back, we see how Haruka got himself in this situation. Haruka has always been a loner, and Haruka explains that it is because he never wanted anything to do with his classmates. Haruka didn't like any of them, and they would get in the way of what he found most important, and that was reading. As Haruka looked around his classroom, the divide among the students was very clear. There were the popular girls, the delinquents, the jocks, the class rep, the nerds, and the other category groups. Haruka didn't belong to any of these groups, but he wouldn't have it any other way. This was when a magic circle appeared out of nowhere. Haruka was excited, because it was just like the ones he had read in manga, but Haruka remembered that going to another world is a huge pain. The heroes in the manga always ended up having to be around a bunch of people, but that sounded like torture to Haruka. Haruka tried his best to get out of the classroom, but it didn't go so well. All the other students panicked as the magic circle expanded, but Haruka cleverly escaped through an air vent. Unfortunately for Haruka, the magic circle chased him up there, and he found himself in the generic white void place. Haruka knew exactly what to expect. From reading so much manga, Haruka wondered where the typical king was, and his daughter, who was beyond the reach of any nerd, would show up. Some old man frantically signaled to him, so Haruka realized that this man was some sort of god. It turns out that the teleporting was first come first serve, so Haruka's classmates were teleported already, and Haruka was left behind. Haruka was allowed to pick his status and skills, just before being sent to his new world. A giant board appeared with all the options, but Haruka was disappointed about something. This was the first time the old man summoned so many people, so all the cheat skills were already taken, and only the worthless ones were left. Haruka took a look at his options, but they were all terrible. One skill was just being able to hold a stick. Some other ones were just good overall general health and walking. Haruka made himself feel even worse by seeing some of the overpowered skills that he missed out on, like 4-element magic. Back to the bad stuff, Haruka found titles like Shut-In and Neat. Haruka demanded for the old man to give him more options, because he wouldn't even be able to pass the first village with the ones he had to choose from. The old man became fed up, so he decided to just give Haruka all the remaining skills at once. Haruka gained all the leftover worthless skills, and he was teleported. In the new world, Haruka is supplied with a bag that can hold unlimited items. Haruka gears up and checks his stats. Haruka's stats screen tells him to roll some dice, and he remembers reading about this skill. It allows Haruka to allocate points by rolling dice. Haruka curses the old god for giving him such a useless skill, and he rolls the dice. Haruka gets a double M, but Haruka has no clue what that means. Haruka assumes the worst, as he thinks that M stands for a masochist. However, Haruka's stats screen just tells him to choose which stat he wants to add to. Haruka doesn't think that raw stats will help him survive with his terrible skills, so he chooses to put the points into luck. Haruka's strategy is to completely ignore a balance build, and instead he will just max out luck. Just then Haruka realizes that the M stands for max, because his luck status is now maxed out. Haruka is surprised when he notices that he has 2 extra skills in the sea of useless skills. Haruka assumes that it is because he was summoned alone. Haruka's loner title means that he is a loner with no friends, and he cannot form a party. Haruka's servitude skill allows him to command others, and it was given to him because of his loner status. That's pretty cool, but it also means that Haruka has to say goodbye to his dreams of having a harem. Haruka wonders where all his classmates are, but it doesn't matter, because he can't party with them anyway. Haruka decides to just begin his journey, and he wants to start by securing a base of operation. It is pretty hard to see through the forest, so Haruka is worried about a monster showing up. Haruka wonders if he has a skill that could be useful, but the only one that comes to mind is the skill that allows him to sleep off. Haruka tries on the contact lenses he has in his bag, and finds that it is actually super useful. It allows him to see a bunch of extra stuff, and he finds that it grants him the appraisal skill. This leads to Haruka finding an edible mushroom that draws out latent abilities. Haruka's bottomless bag lets him take as many as he wants, so Haruka apologizes to it for thinking it was useless earlier. Haruka drinks down some water, but he hears something in the distance. This sound leads him to a cave, and he prays that he doesn't find a monster. Haruka's bag came with a bunch of camping stuff, so he decided to make this cave his base. Haruka uses temperature magic to light some branches on fire, and determines that the leftover skills are actually pretty useful. Haruka checked his stats again, and found that his temperature magic leveled up, which in fire magic. Haruka worries about what he will do if a monster appears, because he can only smack it with the stick right now, but he just ends up falling asleep. The next day Haruka wakes to find that everything is okay. Haruka has items that repel monsters, and his shut-in title protects his living space. Now Haruka can use fire magic to start fires, so he cooks himself some breakfast. Haruka had some beef jerky in his bag, and Haruka had some of the mushrooms he found the day before. The food is delicious, and Haruka is very grateful for his villager starter bag. It is more than just a villager bag, so Haruka thinks it is more like a bag for a survivalist. Haruka heads out to find more food for later, but he knows that the main concern right now is how to protect himself from monsters. Just then Haruka finds the last thing he wants to see: 2 goblins. They are small fry monsters, but their stats are higher than expected. Haruka wonders if he can even win, but he realizes that it doesn't matter because Haruka will have to learn to deal with monsters one way or another. Unfortunately, Haruka doesn't think that his stick will do much. Haruka does have a skill called wrapping, which allows him to wrap all sorts of things with magic and grants various effects. This seems to make his stick stronger, so Haruka is determined to surpass everyone, even without any cheating skills. Haruka begins his first attack ever, and he brutally beats down the first unsuspecting goblin. The second one tries to attack him, but its moves are pretty lame, and Haruka easily dodges them. Haruka somehow knows how to use a new power, and he eliminates the second goblin. Afterwards, Haruka is pleased after winning his first battle, and he heads back to base. Haruka brought back one of the clubs that the goblin used, but he determined that his stick was still better. Haruka is excited to find that he leveled up, and all his stats more than doubled. His cane mastery skill leveled up as well, which is strange because Haruka just swung his stick around a few times. Haruka got a magic infusion skill as well, which probably came from him enchanting his stick with magic. His calisthenics skill also went up, because Haruka has never missed a morning exercise. Haruka is exaggerating quite a bit, as he has only been in this new world for 2 days. Later, Haruka is tired of eating mushrooms already. He would rather eat meat, but Haruka knows that he would be scolded by the class rep for being ungrateful. With his meal done, Haruka decides to try out enhancing himself. This magic infusion skill enhances his physical and magical defenses. Haruka's appraisal skill has also reached level 2, but he wonders why it is showing a bunch of question marks on all his stuff. Haruka decides not to overthink things, and he leaves. Haruka celebrates as the forest blesses him with something already, but he realizes that it is just another mushroom. Haruka searches for meat that might grow out of trees, but Haruka remembers that he is supposed to be practicing his magic. Haruka finds that his enhanced body is much lighter, so much so that it feels like he is teleporting. That isn't all, as his dexterity is insane now too. Haruka finds a more powerful goblin, but he easily defeats them. Haruka takes out another, so Haruka is confident that he can defeat even a group of 3 of them now. Haruka actually runs into a group of 3 goblins, but he is a coward, and Haruka decides that he has had enough fighting for the day. Haruka recaps his day, which consisted of his goblin battle and magic studying at night. On day 5, Haruka succeeded in defeating a goblin with a single strike, and he decorated his base with some fancy stuff he made with magic. Haruka is once again pretty pleased, as his life in this new world is starting to come together. That night Haruka chases a rabbit, as he is desperate to eat some meat. Just then Haruka detects a presence, and he instantly determines that it is not a goblin. It turns out to be his classmates. Haruka is disappointed to see that it is the delinquents. Haruka would rather not get involved with them, but he senses that another group is in the other direction. Haruka's clairvoyant skill allows him to see who it is, but he is horrified to see that it is the popular girls. The jocks are also rapidly approaching. The nerds are nearby too, but after talking to them from time to time in his old world, Haruka would rather take a pass on seeing them. That just leaves the class rep and her friends. Haruka knows that it would be best if he had some friends in this harsh world, and Haruka has known the class rep since grade school. Haruka decides to at least say hello, but he stops himself. Haruka realizes that he feels free and isolated right now. Haruka can live the way he wants, without anyone butting in, and Haruka wouldn't exchange that for anything. Haruka makes his final decision, which is to conquer this new world all alone. Haruka hides from the other students, but one of the delinquents hears something from his direction. Haruka is about to be discovered, but the guys end up assuming that the noise came from the bunny that was supposed to be Haruka's dinner. Haruka spies on the delinquents to hear what they are discussing, but the perverts are just talking about girls. They are some real jerks, but Haruka knows that the class rep will stop them from doing anything to the girls. However, the delinquents have a guy named Tanaka on their side, whose skill will allow them to do whatever they want. The delinquents return to the other students, but Haruka is a serious loner and doesn't want anything to do with them. Haruka heads home to enjoy more of his delicious meal, and he finds that his loner skill has leveled up. It's a depressing title, because it starts to destroy Haruka's self-confidence. Haruka is still only level 3, and he blames his master of none and blockhead skills. Haruka isn't sure what they do, but he assumes that the master of none means that he can't stay focused on any one thing long enough to make it strong. However, it does allow Haruka to accomplish a lot of different things. As for the blockhead skill, Haruka assumes that it just makes him a puppet, which would make it the worst skill to ever exist. Haruka decides to just eat to relax, but this just reminds him that he doesn't have any meat to eat. On day 7, Haruka wakes up to the sounds of fighting. Haruka finds the nerds in battle, and he wonders if he should help them. Haruka uses his appraisal skills on them, and is shocked to find that they won't need his help at all. They have way better classes than him, and Haruka has the worst skills even among the nerds. This reminds Haruka that unlike him, they actually have overpowered skills. Unfortunately, this is a lot like how things were in his old world. Haruka's class was full of top athletes and top students. They even had kids of celebrities, and Haruka often wondered how he ended up there. Haruka determines that the nerds can handle themselves, but he notices that some sneaky little goblins are sneaking up from behind them. Haruka remembers being friendly with the nerds in class, so he decides to help them out. The nerds thank him, so Haruka shows them his cave, and they marvel at how fancy it is. Haruka explains that he just learned how to use earth magic, and he used it to make his cave really secure. They wonder if Haruka did all this alone, so Haruka points out that he is always alone. Haruka wonders why the nerds aren't with the other students, and he is shocked when they reveal that they are on the run. It all started when everyone was transported before Haruka. Everyone was in shock, because they didn't know anything about being in another world, but the nerds were well known on this subject. They were already assigning points to their skills, so the delinquents demanded information from them. Everyone else was falling apart, but the class rep knew that they needed to keep quiet in the woods. However, it was too late, as they were already found by a group of goblins. Haruka is shocked to hear that even the delinquents were trembling in fear, but this was the perfect time for the nerds to shine. They acted like they were the protagonists here, and they began taking out the goblins. The jocks were inspired by all the bravery shown by nerds, so they helped out, and the goblins were defeated. The class rep quickly gathered herself and led everyone to a safe riverside. The nerds took the opportunity to shine even more, as they helped everyone set up camp. Thanks to their lifelong dedication to reading the light novels, they became experts in all things of another world, including survival. The class rep organized everyone and put them to work. Soon enough, everyone came together and began working as one. However, this didn't last long, as the popular girls decided that they didn't want to work anymore. The class rep tried to explain that their best chance of surviving was by sticking together, but the group started to fall apart. They were all tired of working so hard, so they just left all the responsibilities to the nerds. The class eventually fell apart completely, and there was nothing the class rep could do. From then on, only the class rep, the nerds, and a couple of other students did all work. The other students were just so lazy, so the nerds began to resent them. They were even in charge of doing all the fighting. The nerds were super dependable, as they just wanted to get stronger and level up. This was because they saw what skills the delinquents picked. Some of the skills they chose were Charm and Puppeteer, two abilities that grant controls over other people. The nerds knew that the delinquents had bad intentions, so they were leveling up to stand against them. The delinquents were working hard to level up as well, because they needed to use the skills. The nerds kept a very close eye on the delinquents, and they eventually heard what they planned to make some of the girls do. The nerds told the class rep, so she decided that she would have to level up as well. Unfortunately, the delinquents reached the level requirements for their skills soon after. The class rep just so happened to run into them at the worst moment, but seconds later the delinquents were on the ground. The nerds were prepared for this very moment, and they used their seal abilities to seal the charm and puppeteer skills of the delinquents. They exposed the forced harem plans of the delinquents, so the delinquents ran out of the camp. However, one night, the delinquents made their return, and they got their revenge by using weapons. They destroyed the camp, and declared that they would be back later to cause more chaos. For some odd reason, the nerds ended up receiving all the blame for what happened. The popular girls that they kept from becoming puppets ended up being the ones to turn on them first, and the other students followed. The class rep and a few other students took the nerds' side, but it was too much to deal with, and the nerds decided to just leave. Haruka feels bad for them, so he throws a mushroom party for them. Haruka ended up spending the next day with the nerds as well, and he determines that not being a loner is okay sometimes. Haruka eventually says goodbye to his new buddies, and they offer to let Haruka join them. They are going to look for a town, so they can get started as adventurers. Haruka agrees that he is closer to the nerds compared to the other groups, but Haruka shocks everyone when he still declines. Haruka makes them go away, so the nerds leave. Haruka admits to himself that he would like to head into town, but he knows that with his terrible stats, he would only hold the others back. The nerds seem pretty worried about the class rep, so Haruka decides to go check on the other students. On his way there, Haruka is confronted by a kobold, but he manages to punch it into unconsciousness. Haruka is surprised to see that no students has left at the campsite, and his enemy detection skill reveals some footprints. Following the trail leads him to find the popular girls. Haruka panics and decides to get started on cooking dinner back home, but the popular girls try to stop him. They say that they just want to talk, but Haruka knows that being around them is the exact opposite of his quiet life. Haruka runs for his life, but he is shocked when the girls politely ask him to stop by saying please. The popular girls explain that they are looking for the nerds, but Haruka assumes that they just want to put them to work again. However, the popular girls shock Haruka as they want to apologize to the nerds, because they just now realize that they owe their lives to them. Haruka knows that these girls have never apologized in their entire lives, but they are very serious. Haruka breaks the bad news by explaining that they have no chance of catching up to the nerds, but they still want to know where they went. Haruka points out that they wouldn't make it out of the woods the way they are now, because they don't even know how to fight. The popular girls are discouraged, but Haruka demands to know if this means that they are just going to give up. Haruka demands to know if they are serious about apologizing to the nerds, and Haruka thinks about how he needs to test these girls for the sake of the nerds. However, Haruka's tough motivation tactic backfires as the popular girls begin to cry. They just wanted to apologize to the nerds, but now they fear that they will be eaten. Haruka has no clue what's going on, so the popular girls beg for Haruka to teach him how to survive until they find the nerds. Haruka accidentally says yes, and this activates his domination skill. This makes Haruka rule over the popular girls, and Haruka wonders how this could have happened. The popular girls end up following him around like lost puppies with soulless eyes. It is also terrifying, because the popular girls now finish off monsters without a single word. They even bring crystals dropped by the monsters, like they are dogs returning a frisbee. Haruka tries to heal the girls, but they just heal him, even though he doesn't need it. Haruka fears what the class rep would say if she saw all this, and Haruka wonders how he can cancel his domination skill. Just then, the class rep finds him, but Haruka is thinking too hard about a solution to even notice. Haruka doesn't realize that she is there at all, so class rep forces him to acknowledge her. Elsewhere, the delinquents make a plan of their own, and they determine that they must start by getting rid of their biggest problem. Haruka is startled by the class rep screaming, but she reminds him that they have been friends since grade school. The other girls are with her, but the class rep is more concerned about what happened to the popular girls. Haruka doesn't know how to explain how they came under his control, because he doesn't really understand how it happened either. Haruka comes clean and tells her that they have become his servants, but this makes the class rep furious. Class rep points out that the domination skill is only for use on monsters, so Haruka tells her that it was just a mistake. None of the girls believe him, so Haruka decides that it's time for him to go, but the girls stop him. Haruka is just a loner, and Haruka wishes that he could just go home alone. The class rep snaps Shimazaki out of Haruka's spell, and she decides to get answers from her. Haruka doesn't mind as he tries to escape, but the class rep tells him not to leave. As the girls discuss what happened, Haruka decides to practice expanding his home base. More specifically, how to make a basement. Haruka's training starts well enough, but soon he finds that he has buried himself. The class rep helps him up, and she explains that Shimazaki told her everything. Class rep realizes that Haruka was just trying to help the girls, but Haruka doesn't even remember saying anything like that. All the girls thank him for being so kind, but Haruka just wants to go home. The girls pressure him to help them, and the class rep wonders what Haruka means by home. Haruka explains that he has a home in this new world, so the clueless class rep is shocked when she thinks that he was born here. Haruka reveals that he actually built his home, but she can't believe it, because that's quite the feat. The girls have another meeting to discuss what they will do, and they wonder how many people can fit in Haruka's home. Haruka calculates that he can fit at least 240 people, and maybe more, if he takes out his luxurious furniture. The girls get excited when they hear that Haruka has a bath, and they wonder how he can be living in luxury when everyone else is suffering. The girls decide to ask him if they can stay with him for a day, and Haruka is shocked that high school girls want to stay overnight at his place. Haruka can't believe that they are being so scandalous, but the class rep points out that he is the only pervert there. Haruka leads the girls to his house, and they are amazed to see that he even has a path that leads to it. It is so impressive that the class rep wonders if he even has a convenience store, but Haruka says that he was going to make a pharmacy first. The girls arrive at his home exhausted, and Haruka welcomes them. Haruka has made a ton of upgrades to his home, and the girls can't believe how luxurious it is. Haruka of course directs them towards the kitchen, but the girls are more interested in the bathroom. Haruka is shocked when they all strip and hop right into the bath, so he thinks that living too long in the forest has turned the girls into savages. Haruka is quite happy to finally be alone, but he knows that only loners can understand this happiness. The class rep arrives to thank him, because the other guys left all the girls alone, and they were worried. Being around Haruka has calmed them down, and so has all the amenities in his home. The class rep is upset because she couldn't do much for the group, but Haruka points out that she has done plenty. Class rep didn't do as much as the nerds, but Haruka explains that those guys never went outside in the old world, and they spent their entire lives preparing for this moment by playing video games. The class rep feels much better, so she thanks Haruka, but she realizes something. After coming to this world, Haruka has a home, food, and he can even defeat monsters, so that makes him even weirder than the nerds. The class rep goes to sleep with the other girls, but Haruka doesn't think that he will be getting any rest tonight. The next morning Haruka is woken up by a girl who tells him that breakfast is ready, but Haruka just wants to sleep for a while longer. She asks Haruka to get up for her, but he doesn't think that is something she should be saying in this position. Haruka is stunned to learn that she has made fish for breakfast, and he almost knocks her unconscious. Haruka takes one bite out of the delicious fish, and Haruka cries because it has been so long since he has had anything so good. The class rep can't believe that Haruka is getting so emotional from eating fish, because he lives right next to a river, but Haruka explains that he hasn't been able to catch any fish himself. They are too fast and slippery, so he has just been watching all the fish while eating mushrooms by the river. One girl shows him how she uses lightning magic to stun a bunch of fish in the water all at once, and Haruka asks her to show him again. The girl prepares the attack again, but this time Haruka wraps the lightning magic with his packing skill. This allows Haruka to move the magic, and he uses it to stun and capture some fish. Haruka celebrates, as he has also learned the lightning magic skill. Haruka isn't sure about how he was able to do it, but Haruka explains to the girls that by using his packing skill on magic, he can get whatever elemental magic it is. This seems pretty overpowered to the class rep, so Haruka determines that even the worst skills have some use. It is pretty incredible to the class rep, but Haruka reveals that he just got stuck with all the worst leftover skills. The girls are planning to find a nearby town, but they want to level up first. Haruka agrees that they need to earn some levels if they want to continue catching up with the nerds, but the gossip girls point out that they just want to thank them. Haruka agrees to help the girls level up, so he asks them all to tell him what level they are. However, Haruka is shocked when the girls are all over level 16, while he is still just level 7. Haruka tells the girls that their training will start with fighting some kobolds that just happen to appear. It is a group of easy-level monsters, so the girls are confident that they can take them out. Unfortunately, the girls are the ones that just end up getting knocked out. Afterwards, Haruka is happy that his magic tent can expand, but the girls have taken advantage of this by gathering there to have a review of their battle. The girls leave, but the purple-headed girl from earlier stays behind. She apologizes for her behavior in the morning and reveals that she was just testing Haruka. The other boys tried attacking her before, so she wanted to see if Haruka was the same as them. Haruka is totally different from them, as he gave the girls a place to stay and food to eat, and even taught them how to fight. She plans to wake him up for breakfast the next morning as well, and Haruka says goodbye to the girl. The next morning, Haruka enjoys his breakfast, and he overhears some of the girls planning to fight the kobolds again. The class rep arrives to tell them that they aren't ready, and that they need more training. After training against some goblins, the girls feel like they are ready for their rematch. Haruka is worried about them, and his worries are proven correct, as some of the girls are already out and sleeping. Some of them are even faking like they are sick, so he determines that the class rep's training isn't very good. Just then hope is restored, as a few of the girls team up to defeat the kobolds. The girls celebrate and tell the kobolds that they won't be losing to them anymore. Haruka is more relieved than ever, because this means that he will be able to go back to his loner life. Just then Haruka is shocked when the class rep is happy, because they can all go together with Haruka to the town. Moments later, the girls prepare for their journey, and Haruka asks the purple-haired girl to fill her bag as much as possible. The class rep says that they are going overboard, so Haruka decides that he will just have to leave the purple-haired girl behind. The girls begin their journey. Haruka tells the class rep that there is no telling what might happen. Haruka is optimistic and declares that they just need to keep their guard up. Elsewhere in the forest, another student runs for his life. Accidentally, he trips over the small rock, and he is found by the person he was running from. The boy says that he doesn't have the skills that the person is looking for, and he begs for his life. The mysterious person doesn't listen to his pleas, and just strangles him until he is no longer alive. Back in the forest, Haruka continues his journey out of the woods to escort the girls to the nearest town, but on their way they encounter a massive level 11 orc. Haruka tells the girls to stand back and watch how he fights so that they can learn as well. With that, Haruka charges forward with his tiny stick, while the orc swings its massive club down to smash him. To its surprise, Haruka suddenly vanishes from right in front of him. In reality, Haruka is hiding behind a tree and laughing at how slow the orc is. Haruka remembers the nerds telling him that orcs have high resistance to physical attacks and can only be defeated by using magic. Haruka scrolls through his status screen to find good magic to use against the orc, and Haruka notices that he has something called element magic. Haruka notes that he learned the wind, water, and earth elements by using the packing magic in various ways, like vacuum cleaning and plowing the ground, and Haruka becomes happy at how smart he is. Just then the orc breaks the tree Haruka is hiding behind and starts attacking him. Haruka jumps back and tries to dodge everything, and then gets behind the orc and strikes it with his tiny stick. However, to everyone's surprise, the orc takes a lot of damage and ends up hugging the ground with its last breath. Haruka thinks about how orcs are supposed to have high physical defense, and the girls look at him with a suspicious face as well. Haruka says that he will take the next one down using magic, just like how the nerds told him to. The next time they come across an orc, Haruka creates a fireball in his hand and gently throws it at the orc's head. This makes orc explode on the spot, and Haruka one-shots another orc. Haruka wonders what's happening, and the girls complain because there is no way they can learn anything when Haruka keeps one-shotting monsters. Later that night, they all camp outside and enjoy some roasted mushrooms, while Haruka creates a trap using earth magic for everyone's safety. Haruka thinks about how his tent has monster repellent and is equipped with presence detection magic as well, so the girls should be safe for the night. Haruka starts planning their route for the next day, so he uses his map skills, which evolved from his appraisal and contact lens skills. Haruka looks at it and thinks that they should follow along the river, but then he suddenly detects someone's presence. Haruka notices that some humans walking towards them, and Haruka worries that they might be delinquents. However, to his relief, it turns out to just be the jocks. Meanwhile, the class rep notices Haruka talking to them and decides to listen to their talk. Haruka asks the jocks what they're doing there and wonders if they were stalkers trying to check up on the girls while they were sleeping. Haruka asked them if they were also creeps while being muscleheads, but they cried out and said that they were not. One of them says that they are not there for the girls, they are there for him. Haruka teases them by asking if they like boys, but they say they are not that way. After that, Haruka asked them why they were hiding from the girls, and they replied that it was because they couldn't trust anyone anymore. They explain that there is a skill that is much more dangerous than the puppetry and mesmerize skill. Haruka thinks that they must be talking about the hijack skill, which allows the user to steal other skills and abilities. The jocks say that the delinquents didn't say anything about the hijack skill, so that must mean they don't have it. However, that means that someone else has it, so they must be cautious of everyone. After hearing this, Haruka says that they must be stupid, because they didn't consider the possibility that he might have that skill. However, they start smiling, and say that if that were the case, then they would be really happy, because they know that he is not a bad guy. Then they ask Haruka if he actually has it or not, and Haruka tells him that he doesn't have hijack, but he has the domination skill, which sounds even worse. They tell him that as long as Haruka has all the weird skills, they won't have to worry, because Haruka will most likely just sit alone somewhere without harming anyone. After that, they say that they will keep an eye out for the delinquents in the forest, and they are just looking to warn Haruka about the hijack skill, so he can stay safe. Then they ask him to apologize to the girls on their behalf for not standing up to the delinquents earlier, and they walk away. Haruka sees them off by telling them to consult with the goblins if they are in trouble next time, because they are both idiots, so they will get along well for sure. The next morning, Haruka tells everyone to prepare their equipment, and then they walk to the forest to look for some herbs before they leave. The class rep tells Haruka that she knows about his talk with the jocks last night, and she apologizes to him. Haruka realizes that it is about the hijack skill, and Haruka says that he knows that she is the one who has it. The class rep says that she asked the nerds to keep it a secret, but Haruka says that it was pretty obvious, but the jocks are too dumb to realize that. Haruka tells class rep not to worry about it, because they all trust her with that skill. That is why the nerds didn't steal it from her, like they did with the delinquents. This makes the class rep really happy, and she starts tearing up. Haruka points out that she has been crying a lot since coming to this world, but the class rep says that it is because of him. Haruka freaks out and says that it's a false accusation, and runs away. However, when Haruka leaves, the class rep tells herself that it is because Haruka makes her so happy. After that, they continue their journey, and Haruka decides to sell some fresh fruit juice on the way to cheer everyone up. One girl says that she doesn't have any money, but would be interested in paying another way. However, the class rep scolds Haruka for being a pervert, and he stops selling the juices, which makes the other girls weep about not getting any. They continue walking through the forest until Haruka spots the river. Haruka tells the class rep that it should be safe to camp out here for the night, and says that he will go on ahead to do some scouting as Haruka dashes away. While running, Haruka enhances his physical strength and uses weight magic to make himself lighter. Haruka gets a good view of the forest from above, but then Haruka realizes that he doesn't have a way to land safely, so Haruka falls to the ground. Then Haruka goes back to the camp and gets scolded by the class rep for being reckless. Haruka is a clever guy, so he tries to make up for it by saying that he picked up some fresh fruits to make more juice. The next day, they get back to treading their way out of the forest and encounter a bunch of new things on their way. They find a lost girl from their group and enjoy some time playing in the river, and even get chased by a horde of orcs. However, in the end, they manage to get out of the forest, which made everyone excited. Haruka notes that his vision is covered by the hills in the area, and he notices a new airwalk skill in his status screen. Haruka uses it to fly up to get a better view of their surroundings, and notices a party of people from this world getting attacked by a pack of monsters. Haruka gets down and tells the class rep everything. Being the good leader that she freaks out and says that they should help them. However, Haruka warns that there is no guarantee that the people are actually good. There is no way to know if they will hurt them once they save them from the monsters. Haruka suggests they continue walking forward, but the class rep says that she will fight back if they try to hurt her classmates. Class rep wants to save them, so she looks at Haruka with baby eyes. Because of this, Haruka says that he will go there on his own. They are too far away, and the others won't be able to make it, even if they run at full speed. Then Haruka uses physical enhancement and weight magic again, and then Haruka casts wind magic to fly himself into the air. Then Haruka continues flying towards the people using his airwalk skill. However, Haruka notices the class rep hanging from his cloak, and Haruka asks her what the class rep is doing. Class rep says that she got caught up in the wind magic and tells them to look in front of him as they are about to crash. Unfortunately, Haruka says that he doesn't know how to apply brakes. They both crash down on the monsters near the people's party and end up saving them in the process. Haruka gets up and the party leader introduces himself as Ofter, alongside his partner Gatek. They thank him for saving them, and explain that merchants were being attacked by monsters on this route. Because of that, they decided to pick up the quest from the Adventurers Guild, hoping that they would be able to make some money. However, if the fight had continued, they wouldn't be alive right now. After that, they pack their stuff, and Haruka waits for the other girls to catch up to them. While waiting, he cooks up some of his mushrooms and shares them with the others. They thank him for it, and reveal that the mushrooms are actually quite valuable. The mushrooms restore their strength, and Haruka becomes jealous of the old dudes at the party for getting the chance to go on adventures with such hotties. Just then the class rep comes back to her senses and stops Haruka from turning into a villain. The other girls eventually catch up, and they become excited to see real-life elves. The party show them the way to a town called Omui, and the girls start running towards it excitedly, like some kids. On the other hand, we see the delinquents grinding up some levels in the forest. They say that it is about time they take revenge from the girls and have their way with them. However, the nerd that they kidnapped suggests that they first get their puppetry and mesmerize skills unsealed. The delinquents all agree, and they decide to hunt the nerds group first. At the same time, the jocks look at them from behind some trees and become worried about them making their move. All the girls excitedly run through the city streets while appreciating all the amazing stuff this city has to offer, but class rep reminds them that they don't have any money and have a ton of stuff to do. Then class rep runs off to round all the girls, and Haruka smiles because now that he has successfully helped everyone make it to the city, they shouldn't need him anymore, which means he can return to his peaceful loner life. Class rep is having a hard time getting the girls to behave, so she asks Haruka to help her out a little, but Haruka is already relaxing in the shade since his job is done. Class rep gets upset, and while she understands that Haruka is relieved that they are finally in the city, still there is a lot of stuff they need to do. Class rep blows her whistle to get all the girls' attention, and once they're gathered, class rep tells the plan she came up with. First, they will all head over to the Adventure Guild and sell all the items they collected on their way here. And once they have done that, they will register with the guild and rent a room in an inn for the night. And while they are doing that, they can also ask if anyone has seen the nerds come through here recently. It's a good plan, but the popular girls are offended that class rep is treating the nerds like some unimportant side quest, so class rep apologizes. But Haruka makes fun of the popular girls for caring about the nerds so much. A little while later, the group makes their way to the Adventurers Guild, and it's a lot more intimidating than Haruka had expected. Everyone inside is giving them dirty looks already, and Haruka doesn't want to head inside, but Ofter tells him the guild master wants to meet with him. This sounds like bad news, so Haruka tells class rep to get all the girls registered while he goes to see what the guild master wants. Haruka heads upstairs, and all the people here look scarier than the ones downstairs, so he is put on edge. Haruka finds Gatek waiting at the end of the room, and Gatek leads Haruka into the guild master's office, where he comes face to face with the scary-looking man. But it looks like Haruka was worried for nothing, because the guild master just wanted to thank him for saving Ofter and his party. After that is done, Haruka heads back downstairs, and Haruka notices a counter, so he assumes that's where you go to sell magic stones and heads over to ask the attendant. The attendant confirms that he can sell his magic stones here, so Haruka gives her a bunch of stones from his bag. There is a lot more where that came from, but the attendant asks him to stop because Haruka has already dropped 2 days worth of overtime on her desk. So she just asks him to come back tomorrow, so she can finish appraisal all of these first. Haruka doesn't mind waiting, and all the girls are done registering as adventurers, so Haruka must hurry up and register as well. Haruka proudly walks into the registration room to get himself assessed, but once the assessment is done, the guild worker tells Haruka that he is too weak to become an adventurer. The guild requires people to be at least level 10 before they can register to become adventurers, and even then, you have to be in a party to qualify. If Haruka wanted to register as a solo adventurer, he would have to be at least level 20, but he is only level 9 right now, and his loner skill prevents him from forming a party, so Haruka is going to be alone for a long time. Later that night, class rep leads everyone to the lodging that the guild prepared for them. But once they finally make it there, Haruka starts freaking out, because this place looks a lot like a love hotel, but it isn't. So everyone says goodnight to one another and heads to their separate room. The next morning, they all get up to meet at the diner to get some breakfast, and class rep is excited to tell them that this town is supposedly really safe, so they are free to head into town and do whatever they want. The girls are happy, so they start making plans to go shopping later today, and since they can handle themselves from here on out. Haruka plans to head back into the woods once he gets paid for his crystals. Speaking of which, Haruka heads to the guild after breakfast to see if they are done appraising his magic stones, but when Haruka gets there, he receives sincere apologies because they don't have enough money on hand to pay him all at once. The guild master comes out as well to personally offer his apologies and asks Haruka if he would be willing to allow the guild to pay him in installments. Haruka says he is fine with it, and the guild master is thankful that he is so understanding, but in the meantime, he tells Haruka he can have the amount for the magic stones they have already appraised. There are 8 million hellies in that bag, and from what Haruka and class rep have learned since arriving in Omui, the money here pretty much had the same value as money back on Earth. So Haruka just became rich. Haruka's payment is so high because he brought in more F-rank stones than the guild has ever seen, and he also defeated those wolves, so that contributed to the payout. Since Haruka just got a small fortune, he decides to go shopping before heading back into the forest, and Gatek says he knows a place that Haruka might want to visit. Haruka thinks Gatek is taking him to an adult establishment, but to his disappointment he is just leading him to an old weapon shop. This place collects unique equipment from dungeons, and Haruka is a bit of a special case. Gatek felt like this would be a good place for him to get his equipment. The place may look sketchy, but Gatek assures Haruka that the stuff here is really high quality. Haruka takes Gatek's word for it, but still Haruka wants to try some of the stuff before he buys anything, and the stuff may look weird, but the effects they provide are amazing, so Haruka spends all day looking through the stuff and buys as much of it as he can afford. Just then he notices a necklace that looks good. The only description his appraisal skill gives is that it fits 7. Come to think of it, Haruka got the same message when he tried to appraise his villager set, so Haruka decides to ask the shopkeeper if he knows what 7 is supposed to mean. The shopkeeper explains that in the case of the necklace can combine the effects of up to 7 items, and allows the wearer to use them all at once. That sounds really useful to Haruka, and if the effect also applies to his villager set, then that means he can stack even more effects onto his equipment. It's about to begin sorting through all the items for the best effects to combine, but just then, class rep shows up and starts yelling at him for staying out so late. Haruka realizes that he has been here for a while, but he still has a lot more stuff he wants to try out. However, as Haruka is holding one of the items, it suddenly starts reacting, and before he realizes it, all the items in front of him get combined into one. The shopkeeper gets angry because Haruka hasn't actually paid for anything yet, and all the stuff cost him well over 10 million to acquire. Haruka starts panicking because he doesn't have that much money, so Gatek pleads with the shopkeeper to accept Haruka's 8 million instead. The next day Haruka is sulking over the fact that he just wasted all his money, so now he is completely broke. Haruka would like to go outside and gather some more crystals, but people aren't allowed to leave town to hunt monsters unless they are registered as adventurers. So he tried to sneak out with some of the girls, but class rep caught him and started yelling at him. So Haruka had a perfect plan to sneak out without class rep spotting him. Haruka's villager cloak was combined with an invisibility cloak, so with this you should be able to make it out of the city unnoticed. Haruka sneakily walks past class rep and the other girls, and he feels bad for leading them without saying anything, but class rep would definitely try to stop him if she found out. Haruka manages to successfully escape the lodging, and once he is outside, Haruka makes the mistake of taking off his invisibility cloak. As Haruka attempts to jump over the wall, he gets spotted by a couple of the girls that are outside, and they ask him where he is going, so Haruka freaks out and accidentally smashes his golden balls against the wall. Haruka falls back to the ground and yells at the girls for startling him like that, but they say they just want to know why Haruka was jumping over the wall. Haruka recognizes the girls as part of the athletic group, but one of them is missing, so Haruka uses his perception skill to locate her, and to his horror Haruka discovers that she is about to strip naked in the middle of the street. Haruka and the athletic girls all rush over to stop her, but even though they manage to get to her before she can completely undress, Haruka's escape plans have been ruined. The next day all the girls are heading out to complete a quest for the guild, and Haruka asks if they will let him join them, but class rep refuses because she doesn't trust him after he tried to ditch the group yesterday. Class rep assures him that they will be back in no time, and Haruka says he will wait, but as soon as class rep and the others have left, Haruka starts smiling because he has no intention of waiting for them. Haruka has learned from his last mistake, so he keeps on his cloak and waits until he is outside the city gates before taking it off. Haruka has officially made it out of the city, and nothing is stopping him from making it back to his house in the forest. But as he is running, Haruka notices a bunch of destroyed buildings over in the distance. Normally this would be a long side quest, but Haruka just wants to get back to his house, so he completely ignores it. Then Haruka sees a horde of goblins, which would be a great source of experience if he took the time to slaughter them. But once again, Haruka just wants to head back to the forest. Now this time while running, Haruka notices a carriage being attacked by bandits, and this is pretty hard to ignore, especially since the people inside are asking for his help. But ultimately, Haruka decides to just ignore it and keep moving. However, as Haruka is trying to leave, the bandits attack him, so he tries to explain to them that he doesn't want to get involved. The bandits refuse to leave him alone, so Haruka is forced to take action and roasts them with a single fire spell. The staff Haruka is holding as a result of one of the items combination he got stuck with, and it turns out that it's pretty powerful. As the bandits get back up, Haruka once again tries to talk his way out of the fight, so he tells the bandits that they should leave him alone if they know what is good for them. The bandits admit that his magic is powerful, but since they assume magic is the only thing Haruka is good at, they all decide to attack him at close range. However, Haruka is easily able to knock them down with one strike each. The bandits can't believe they're losing to a kid, so they ask what Haruka's job is. Haruka says he is jobless, so they get shocked. The bandits decide to check Haruka's status to know what they're up against. But when they see that Haruka is only at level 9, they decide they can beat him if they use their weapon skills, even though they have been losing so far. Weapon skills are only available from level 20, so Haruka doesn't have any, and from what he knows, weapon skills are really powerful, so Haruka is a little worried. The bandits begin using their weapon skills, but while it is certainly dangerous, they keep yelling out their attack before they use it, so Haruka is easily able to dodge until they all pass out from exhaustion. Just then Haruka notices a girl approaching him from behind, and this is the last thing he wants because this looks like an unskippable side quest. The girl's name is Marielle, and she is from a noble family. Marielle wants to thank Haruka for helping her, but now she thinks about it. He initially tries to ignore her, so Marielle wonders if she should thank him. Regardless of Haruka's initial intentions, Marielle still appreciates him for helping her, and she has a favor to ask of him. Her father is the lord of the city, and Marielle was hoping Haruka would accompany her back to the city since she feared for her safety. Haruka doesn't want to at first, but Marielle mentions rewarding him for his help, so he decides to go with her after all. On the way, Marielle asks him where Haruka was coming from when he met her, so Haruka begins to tell about the crappy city he came from. Because the guild didn't have enough money to pay him, they refused to register him as an adventurer, and the city wouldn't even let him leave without a permit. Now Marielle realizes which city Haruka is talking about, and Marielle begins crying because she hadn't realized how little Haruka thought of the city her father runs. After seeing Marielle's reaction, Haruka realizes she is the daughter of the Lord of Omui, and that means this carriage is heading back there, so Haruka regrets agreeing to escort her. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the jocks and the delinquents are squaring up for a battle because the jocks refuse to let the delinquents do anything bad to the girls. And the delinquent leader has no problem with murdering the jocks if he has to, but as he raises his sword, he gets stabbed through the back. Both the jocks and the delinquents are shocked to see this, but as the rest of the delinquents try to avenge their friend, the first one to attack just gets stabbed as well. The last two decide to strike simultaneously for better odds of winning, but the unknown attacker can easily take them down as well. After seeing this, the jocks realize they are outmatched, so they attempt to run away, but the assailant is too quick for them to escape, so he appears in front of them and begins menacingly walking forward. Meanwhile, Haruka has just been dragged back to town by Marielle, but Haruka really doesn't want to come. Marielle starts crying, so he decides to go with her just to be nice. Once Haruka arrives at the Lord's house, Marielle leaves him alone for a minute, so he looks around. It certainly looks like a nice house, but that has nothing to do with Haruka, so Haruka starts heading for the front door so he can leave. However, before Haruka leaves, Marielle gets back and she is upset that he is trying to leave because Marielle specifically asked him to wait while she changes her clothes. Marielle tells him to just wait a little longer because she still has to do something to thank him, and Haruka doesn't want to. Since Marielle is so insistent, he has no choice but to listen. Haruka may have been against staying here at first, but once Marielle shows the feast she had prepared for him, Haruka completely changes his attitude. Marielle did this as her way of showing Haruka some appreciation, but she is starting to get annoyed because Haruka is ignoring her. While Haruka is stuffing his face with food, Marielle asks one of her maids to bring the rest of his reward, so a pouch of money is brought, and while Haruka acknowledges it, he doesn't seem all that excited. As a bonus, Marielle noticed that Haruka isn't registered with the city, so she went through the liberty of getting a custom ID card made for him which will grant him permission to leave and enter the city anytime he wants. That's a really cool gift, but Haruka stopped paying attention after he received the money, and Haruka is more focused on the dessert that was brought to him. The next day, class rep and the rest of the girls begin questioning Haruka about what happened last night. Haruka explains to them that he was just summoned to the local lord's mansion, and while class rep knows Haruka isn't lying, she doesn't understand why the local lord would want to see Haruka in the first place. Haruka chooses to keep his explanation vague, so they don't find out about how he met Marielle during his failed escape attempt. Eventually, the girls let it go and decide to go out on a mission. But before they leave, class rep reminds Haruka that he's not allowed to leave town. Haruka seems oddly compliant this time. But that's just because Haruka knows nothing is stopping him from leaving town once the girls leave. With his new ID, Haruka can finally get out of town without any problem, but before Haruka goes, there are a few things he has to do first. Haruka uses his money to buy new equipment, eats as much good food as possible, and then starts writing a note for the class rep so she won't get mad about him leaving. Haruka writes that he is going back to the forest to check on the jocks, and while Haruka is just writing it as an excuse, he is worried about those muscle heads. Haruka heads outside, and after presenting his ID, he is allowed to leave town, and this time Haruka won't let himself get distracted by any annoying problem. Before long, Haruka returns to the woods, and he is glad to see that everything is still the same as it was when he left it. Haruka can't wait to get back to his house, but while he is not paying attention, Orc sneaks up and attempts to smash his head in. Fortunately, Haruka's stats are way too high for something like that to work on him, so he just one-shots the Orc with his staff. Haruka finds it weird that an orc would appear around here since they are usually only found a lot deeper in the forest. And that is not the only strange thing he discovers, because he finds a human blood trail nearby. Haruka knows the blood couldn't have come from the nerds since they are too strong to lose to anything in the forest, so he assumes it must have come from one of the jocks. Haruka begins tracking the blood trail until he eventually finds the jocks, all bloody and bruised, under a tree. At first Haruka thinks they are dead, but once he gets closer Haruka realizes they are still breathing, so Haruka dumps every healing potion he has until they eventually regain consciousness. They begin explaining everything to Haruka, and while Haruka had initially thought the jocks were attacked by the delinquents, Haruka is shocked to be told that all the delinquents are actually dead. Haruka asks if the nerds were targeted as well, but the jocks have no idea, although it doesn't seem likely since the nerds left the forest a long time ago. They can tell that Haruka intends to go after the person who did this, so they warn him that Tanaka is insanely strong now, so much so that they barely last a couple of seconds against him. Also, he stole all their overpowered weapons, so now Tanaka is even stronger than he was before. They think he must have been planning this whole thing from the moment the class got teleported here, and they don't know if they'll be able to stop him, but they know who his next target is going to be. Of all the students left alive, the most likely target is going to be class rep since she has the hijack skill. Haruka certainly thinks Tanaka may go after class rep for her hijack skill, but the only people who knew about the skill were class rep, the nerd, and Haruka, so he wonders how the information got out. The jocks were only able to figure it out because Tanaka kept asking for class rep's location, and when they couldn't give him the information he wanted, Tanaka beat them up till they're barely alive. They didn't want to go looking for class rep since that would put her in danger, so they came to the area of Haruka's house in hopes that he would find them before they died. How strong Haruka is, they are sure they'll be able to win if they all fight together, but Haruka doesn't know if he really wants to get involved in a battle like this in the first place. Haruka specifically wanted to avoid side quests, but if class rep is being targeted, he has no choice but to put a stop to it. However, Haruka makes it clear to the jocks that he will be fighting this battle alone. The jocks try to talk him out since going alone is risky, but when they see the look in his eyes they realize Haruka is serious about it, so they agree to let him go alone. Haruka tells them they should just head to town in the meantime and meet up with the rest of the girls, and while they are there, they better apologize to class rep for leaving the group earlier. As the jocks leave, Haruka thinks to himself that it might be better to have them fight with him, but he can't risk having all of them fight at once, since if Tanaka manages to overpower them, there would be no one left to warn the girls. The safest option is for him to tackle this alone and to make sure he is ready for the battle when he eventually faces Tanaka. At the same time, back in the city, class rep is worried after realizing that Haruka has left the city. The other girls tell her there is nothing to be worried about since Haruka will definitely come back. Back in the forest, Haruka is thinking over his plan against Tanaka because the jocks told him that Tanaka has incredibly powerful weapon skills. Even the weapon skills of bandits are frightening, but something Haruka learned after dealing with them is that a weapon skill can't be cancelled after it is started. So if Tanaka tries to use a weapon skill on him, he will have to try and take advantage of that weakness. To do that, Haruka wants to try getting himself a new skill, but that means he has to level up. Just then, Haruka notices a bunch of goblins that were attracted by the blood of the jocks, and these are pretty high level, so he takes them all out for experience. However, Haruka is still unable to level up. Haruka wishes to go against something stronger to get more experience points, and just as Haruka says this, a Goblin King shows up, so he gets ready to take it down. The Goblin King is strong and its attacks are also really fast, but Haruka is able to jump out of the way at the last second. A single strike from the king would be fatal, and Haruka wouldn't have the time to counterattack without getting hit, so he is forced to come up with a new strategy. Haruka uses his rap skill to combine his other skills into a brand new one, and with this new skill, Haruka dashes past the Goblin King and defeats it in an instant. Haruka is glad to see that his idea to combine different skills works out so well, but in the middle of his celebration a terrifying presence appears behind him, so Haruka is forced to fall back and prepare for another fight. This monster is a Goblin Emperor and is already at level 50 while Haruka is only at level 9, so Haruka doesn't think there is any way to beat Emperor if he fights head on. The only option is to try his combined skill again, so Haruka activates it and charges straight at the Goblin Emperor. The second he is within range, Haruka strikes at it, but his special skills do nothing to hurt it. The Goblin Emperor gets back up as if nothing happened, and then it starts striking at Haruka with incredible speed. It is clear that the Goblin Emperor is using weapon skills since its attacks are way too powerful, so Haruka looks for an opening in the attack so he can launch a counterattack. Haruka finds the opening and strikes the goblin in the chest, sending it flying backwards. Haruka does a considerable amount of damage to it, but the Emperor begins healing itself. If regular attacks aren't going to get him anywhere in this battle, Haruka thinks he is going to have to make up another combined skill, but before Haruka can do that, the Goblin Emperor uses one of his weapon skills and launches powerful slashes at Haruka. Haruka barely manages to block the attack, and with all these injuries his chances of winning aren't good, but Haruka has to keep going if he wants to become strong enough to protect his friends. Haruka gets back up and charges at the Goblin Emperor in a desperate attempt to defeat it, and by the time morning comes, Haruka is the last one standing, and because of his efforts he gains 2 levels. Now Haruka is at level 11, he heads back to his house to check his new status. Just as expected, his new level has granted him several new skills, but Haruka isn't sure if it will be enough for him to beat Tanaka in a fight. Still, with his skill he is able to attack in a split second to take advantage of the weapon skill. So Haruka just hopes things work out in his favor. Later that evening outside Haruka's house Tanaka shows up, and Haruka has been waiting for him. Haruka remembers Tanaka being bullied by the jocks when they first got here, but it turns out he was just playing along so he could get his revenge in the end. While Tanaka and Haruka face off, the girls have just returned to Omiwi after a long day of adventuring, and as they walk back they notice a couple of guys sitting outside the walls. They soon realize that it's the jocks, and they are glad to see them, but they are also really worried because the jocks are in pretty bad shape. Class rep remembers Haruka saying he was going to check on the jocks in his note, so she asks them if they know where Haruka is, and they tell her that he is currently fighting in the forest to protect them all. Back in the forest, Tanaka is disappointed to learn that Haruka is the only one here, since Tanaka was hoping to class rep instead. He even went through all the trouble of getting the delinquents to cause trouble and split up the class. Haruka realizes Tanaka is behind in everything so far, and Tanaka intends to kill as many people to get what he wants. However, Tanaka doesn't see Haruka as a threat, so Tanaka decides to leave the loser alone and looks for class rep so he can steal her hijack skill. Even though Haruka doesn't particularly like his classmates, he still wants to protect them, so Haruka holds his staff up to Tanaka's neck and says he will not pass. Tanaka is annoyed that nobody like Haruka is standing in his way, so he is more than willing to kill Haruka if he wants to ruin his plans. Tanaka creates a shockwave and launches at Haruka, so Haruka raises his hands to defend himself. Before Tanaka left the white room, he saw that there were only trash skills left on the skill board, so even if he doesn't exactly know what skills Haruka has, Tanaka is sure he must be superior to someone like him. Tanaka then uses his magic to conjure and launch several rocks at Haruka, but as Haruka tries to defend himself again, Tanaka uses a tweak skill to hinder his movements, so Haruka is frozen in place for a second and just barely able to dodge out of the way before the rocks could crush him. Even though Haruka can still move, he is a lot slower than normal as a result of Tanaka's skill, and Tanaka intends to take full advantage of Haruka's debuff, so Tanaka begins spawning crystal spikes beneath him. Haruka manages to evade all the spikes by jumping side to side, but he won't be able to keep this up for much longer. Tanaka commends Haruka for surviving this long against him, but before he finishes Haruka off, Tanaka has one question he wants to ask. Tanaka wants to know when Haruka first started suspecting him, and Haruka tells him that he has been suspicious from the very start, because there had to have been a reason why Tanaka was sticking around the delinquents back then. Tanaka is impressed that Haruka's instincts were spot on, but now Haruka has a question he wants to ask as well. Haruka wants to know when Tanaka began plotting his despicable plan, and Tanaka proudly states that he has been planning this out from the very beginning. It was a bit of a setback when Tanaka realized that class rep had gotten the hijack skill instead of him, but once he got his tweak skill, a skill that allows him to interfere with the movements of others to an extent, Tanaka knew he could still come out on top. He played his cards right. Just then Tanaka uses magic roots to bind Haruka to the ground, and while Haruka is stuck in place, Tanaka launches a massive fireball to burn him to ash. Tanaka believed this would be enough to kill Haruka, but to his surprise Haruka absorbs the magic and emerges unharmed. Haruka wasn't sure that would work when he tried it, but Haruka is glad he got that magic absorbing vine fused into his staff. Now while Tanaka is still frozen in surprise, Haruka goes on the offensive and charges at him. However, just before Haruka could land a decisive blow, Tanaka summons a sword to block it. Sure, Tanaka was surprised that Haruka managed to block his fire magic, but magic isn't his only means of attacking. Tanaka has so many weapons at his disposal that he is having a hard time deciding which weapon he should use to kill Haruka. For fun, Tanaka decides that he will just use them all to tear Haruka to pieces and charges forward to attack. Haruka tries his best to defend himself, but with all the different attack patterns Tanaka is using, Haruka is unable to keep track of him. Eventually, Haruka gets caught off guard and is knocked backwards into some bushes, and by the time he gets up, Tanaka lands a devastating slash that sends Haruka flying across the forest floor. Haruka survives the slash, but he is out of breath and struggling to get back up. Tanaka soon catches up to him and stands over Haruka's body with a smug look on his face, and as much as Haruka doesn't want to admit it, he might be cooked. Tanaka has too many different attack patterns, and on top of that, he has been using a lot of different skills, so Haruka assumes Tanaka must have copied the skills of all their classmates using the copycat skill. Tanaka is surprised that Haruka managed to figure it out so quickly, and since Tanaka had admitted to it, Haruka deduces that Tanaka must be after class rep because he wants to copy her hijack skill and use it to steal all the original skills. Once Tanaka has stolen all the overpowered skills, he will become the most overpowered person in this world. Tanaka begins attacking Haruka again with the scythe this time, and Haruka is knocked back by the power of his strike. Haruka won't be able to handle much more of this, so he tries to launch an attack of his own to catch Tanaka off guard, but as Haruka strikes, it turns out that Tanaka just used illusion magic to trick him. After seeing that nothing he does will work against Tanaka, Haruka seemingly gives up and stands still while Tanaka charges at him with a sword, but at the last second, Haruka laughs and dodges the sword while whispering in Tanaka's ear that he's figured out his secret. Tanaka is no longer able to easily land hits on Haruka, and Haruka explains that he was intentionally letting Tanaka unleash all the attacks he had at his disposal, so he could find a weakness. While Tanaka was attacking, Haruka noticed that Tanaka never used the same skill more than thrice for some reason, and from that, Haruka deduced that there must be a limit to how many times Tanaka could use his copied skills, so if he just kept dodging long enough, Tanaka is going to run out of skills he uses. Tanaka is a bit panicky that Haruka was able to figure out his weakness, but Tanaka still believes he can take Haruka down before he runs out of skills. However, as Tanaka tries to strike Haruka, Haruka easily leaps over to Tanaka and counterattacks him. Haruka has gotten used to Tanaka's speed, so no matter how many different skills Tanaka throws at him, Haruka won't be caught off guard anymore. Haruka charges at Tanaka to land a finishing blow while Tanaka is still disoriented, but Haruka is forced to back off when Tanaka suddenly fires a magic beam at him. Even if Haruka knows Tanaka's secret weakness, he is still overpowered, so he shouldn't be underestimated in the slightest. Tanaka is starting to show signs of exhaustion, but Tanaka gets back to his feet and yells that he will never allow himself to lose to the likes of Haruka. Tanaka may be at a disadvantage now, but he still has one trick up his sleeve, so Tanaka starts running around the forest to overwhelm Haruka. Tanaka's movements are so unpredictable that Haruka has a hard time keeping up with him, but by the time Haruka finally figures out what Tanaka is up to, it's already too late as Tanaka has already cast his death skill on Haruka. Once the skill takes effect, Haruka falls over and Tanaka begins laughing in over his body because he has finally triumphed. Tanaka says because of Haruka, he was forced to use up almost all of his saved skills, but it doesn't matter since once Tanaka kills his classmates and claims the hijack skill for himself, he can get as many permanent skills as he wants. Then Tanaka kicks Haruka's head and begins walking away, but as he is leaving, Haruka speaks up and says it's rude to step on someone's head without apologizing. Tanaka can't believe Haruka is still alive because the death skill has a 100% success rate and Haruka is still level 11, but Haruka has a skill that makes him resistant to negative status effects. Also, Haruka rolled double M's when he first got here, so his luck status is maxed out, which is probably why the death effect didn't work on him. Haruka just fell to the ground for dramatic effects since he thought it would be funny. Tanaka doesn't see the humor in any of this and questions how Haruka is even able to move in the first place since Tanaka used Tweak to restrict his movements from the very start of the fight. Haruka admits that the Tweak skill is really troublesome, and in reality Haruka hasn't been able to move his body at all since Tanaka used that skill on him, but Haruka happens to have a puppet skill, so he has been using that to control his body from the outside this entire time. All the skills Haruka acquired may seem useless on the surface, but in his hands they become insanely powerful. Tanaka refuses to accept that he is losing to someone with nothing but trash skills, so Tanaka begins slashing erratically at Haruka, but Haruka easily parries the slashes away and warns Tanaka that he is going to run out his skills if Tanaka keeps this up. Tanaka refuses to listen and tries hitting Haruka with an overhead slash, but as expected Haruka walks out completely unharmed and tells Tanaka that now his game has come to an end. Tanaka doesn't understand how this could happen to a genius like him since he had perfectly calculated everything to make sure he would come out on top. No matter what, 1 + 1 always adds up to 2, so according to his math, Haruka should never have been able to become this strong. Haruka tells Tanaka that his way of thinking is very naive, because sure math made sense when they were back on Earth, but the laws of Earth don't apply here. Tanaka has always been a genius when it came to school, so he was constantly bored out of his mind and surrounded by his idiotic classmates. Tanaka wished there was a way to put an end to his boring school life, and his prayers were answered when the class got summoned to this world. As soon as Tanaka saw the skill board, he quickly did some calculations to figure out the most exciting way to live his new life. So Tanaka concluded that he had to kill all his classmates and take their skills for himself. So no matter how psychopathic that may make him sound, Tanaka refuses to let nobody like Haruka get in the way of his plan. Tanaka continues attacking with the rest of his skills, but by now he has to be running low on options, so Haruka thinks he might be able to take advantage of that and finally finish Tanaka off. But just as he is about to land the killing blow, the sword stabs his shoulder from behind, and Tanaka reveals that he can control weapons from a distance as well. While Haruka is bleeding and on his knees, Tanaka begins slashing at him with the sword and claims victory is finally his. But Haruka smacks Tanaka with his staff and knocks him away. Tanaka may have created an elaborate plan to ensure his victory, but that is all he had going for him. Tanaka's copycat skill was overpowered from the start, so he never had to put any effort into learning to adapt as Haruka did, and that is why Tanaka is going to lose. Tanaka desperately tries to stab Haruka with his sword, but Haruka is way ahead of him and takes him out with his gambit skill. With this, Tanaka is fatally wounded and falls over dead, but even though Haruka ends up winning this battle, he is still badly wounded in the process, and all the pain comes rushing back to him the second he relaxes. On top of that, all the skills Haruka used during the fight have left him completely drained, so he is on the verge of passing out. However, just before Haruka hits the ground, he is caught by the nerds. Haruka is glad to see them, but he really wishes they had shown a lot sooner, so they could help him with the fight. They may have missed all the fighting, but they are here to help now. Haruka is grateful for the help, but Haruka wonders how they even knew he was out there. They explain that class rep found them just as they were leaving the dungeon, so she told them all about the fight Haruka was in. They couldn't just stand by and let Haruka handle it all by himself, so they took off ahead into the woods to help him. Eventually they all make it back to the city, and all the girls are out standing by the gate to greet Haruka. They are all really worried about him and say they have a feast prepared in his honor, but all this attention makes Haruka feel awkward. Just then the leader of the jocks comes out to see Haruka, and he doesn't need any words and just high-fives Haruka in celebration of his victory. Now all is done, the girls suggest that they all head back to the inn since the bath is ready and they could all use a good bath, so they drag Haruka off. Meanwhile, the popular girls stay behind and finally apologize to the nerds like they have meant to do. The nerds are surprised by this since they never would have expected these girls to show such humility, but they've come to understand they were wrong for how they treated the nerds, and they appreciate everything they did for the group. It looks like everything has been wrapped up quite nicely, so Haruka believes there is no need for him to stay here any longer, so he starts sneaking away to return to his life in the woods. However, before Haruka could get away, class rep spots him and asks where he thinks he is going. Class rep was so worried that Haruka might end up dead from his fight, and now Haruka is finally back. He is trying to leave again. Haruka apologizes, so class rep says it's fine as long as he doesn't try to leave them again, and this time all the girls will be watching him, so there is no way Haruka is getting away from them again. The next day, Haruka wakes up after having a strange dream and heads downstairs where the nerds greet him. From the looks of it, they will head into the dungeon again today, and Haruka is a bit curious since they have been going to the dungeon a lot lately. The nerds admit that there is a particularly rare item they are looking for, and it only drops in the dungeon, which is why they have been so busy lately. Haruka asks nerds what the item does, so they say that it changes others' value of you. They head off on their adventure, while the rare item definitely sounds cool. Haruka has no need for one since he wants to get back to living his life as a loner. Unfortunately, one person is standing in the way of that, and she seems mad for some reason. Haruka freezes in his tracks and asks the class rep why she is mad. Haruka already got yelled at by all the girls yesterday, but the class rep hasn't gotten the chance to personally yell at him yet. Class rep begins yelling at Haruka for doing something so dangerous, not taking her with him, and completely ignoring the fact that class rep was Tanaka's target to begin with. Haruka just apologizes to get this over with and agrees to inform her the next time he plans on risking his life. Class rep seems satisfied after Haruka says this, so she begins walking away, and Haruka is left on the floor, wondering how things got to this point. If Haruka doesn't figure something out soon, he is never going to be able to get back to his loner lifestyle in the woods, but that is when Haruka comes up with an amazing idea. If Haruka hits all the girls with a rare item, they will all like him too much to get mad at him, and if they won't get mad, Haruka is free to leave. With that, Haruka has made up his mind and plans to head into the dungeon today. At the same time, in the Lord's mansion, Marielle is a little worried because her father has been overworking himself recently. Marielle tries to get him to relax with some tea, but he cannot afford to relax just yet, as there have been several sightings of monsters in the area, and it is leading to fallen merchant activities all over the town. So as the Lord, he has to do something about it. Just then, a guard runs into the room and he has really bad news to deliver. A horde of monsters has just appeared near the dungeon. Coincidentally, Haruka happened to run into this horde of monsters. While Haruka wasn't expecting to have it fight anything before getting to the dungeon, he is always up for a quick warm-up. Of course, Marielle has no idea that Haruka is already fighting the monsters, so she rushes over to the guild in a panic and tells the guild master that a huge horde of orcs is heading this way, and if nothing is done it will surely destroy the entire town. Upon hearing this, the entire guild is ready for the action, and since class rep is also there, she offers to help defend the town as well, so class rep rushes off to gather all her classmates, but then when she realizes that Haruka isn't here, as Haruka charges at the horde, he is a bit surprised to see so many of them, and there is even an orc king here too. But it's not like it makes much of a difference to him, since Haruka can still one-shot them all. Back in town, all the adventurers in the city assembled at the gate, expecting to fight for their lives. But all the monsters that were heading their way had already been dispatched, and Haruka had just finished wiping out the orc king. Now Haruka is done with that, he takes a moment to think, since it is pretty strange that all orcs showed up at once. But at the same time, Haruka doesn't really care, so he decides to forget about it and continues heading for the dungeon. Eventually, Haruka locates the dungeon and sneaks past the guard to get in without having any interaction. Once Haruka is inside, he is amazed by how detailed the dungeon interior is, but Haruka can't afford to let himself get distracted because he has a very important mission to complete. Haruka begins looking for the rare item, but he doesn't know what it looks like, so Haruka just wanders aimlessly until he comes across a random treasure chest in the middle of the hall. Haruka is really excited and opens it expecting to find some really cool items, but to his dismay, after using his appraisal skill to check their stats, he finds out that everything in the chest is a piece of junk. Haruka keeps going through the dungeon and finds more stuff, but it is all junk as well, so Haruka eventually gives up on trying to find the rare item on his own and decides to ask that weird merchant if he knows anything about it. Once Haruka gets back to town. Back at the town, everyone has been standing at the gate for hours and waiting for the orcs to attack, and they are starting to think Marielle might have been lying, but all of a sudden, they see something coming from the smoke. So they ready their weapons, but it turns out that it is just Haruka, who is sleepy from a long day of adventuring. Haruka has no idea what's going on here, or why everyone looks so tense, so class rep runs up to him and tells him about the horde of monsters that are heading for this town. Class rep also asks him where he has been all this time, but Haruka can exactly tell her that he is looking for a rare item, so Haruka just remains silent. Gatek asks Haruka if he saw any orcs on his way back here, and now that he mentions it, Haruka remembers slaughtering a horde of orcs earlier, and for some reason, everyone is angry at him for it. Both the guild master and Marielle say they are thankful that Haruka defeated the orcs, but they can't approve of him doing something as dangerous as fighting a horde of monsters by himself. The guild master tells him that there have been reports of increased monster activity, including monsters making their way out of the dungeon, so there is a serious possibility that they may experience a dungeon stampede soon. And that is why he wants Haruka to promise that he won't do anything reckless anymore. Once Haruka is back in his room, he thinks about everything that happened today, and now that Haruka has got the guild master and Marielle his attention, it is going to be even harder for him to get out of town without someone nagging him about it. The next day Haruka heads over to the magic item merchant, and the guy is not happy to see Haruka at all after what he did last time, but Haruka assures him that he is not here for magic items today. All Haruka wants to do is to ask a question. Haruka asks where he can find the affinity raising item, and while the merchant doesn't know of any affinity item, he does know about the pheromone ring that boosts your charisma. That sounds exactly like the kind of thing Haruka is looking for. So Haruka asks the merchant where it's located since it's not anywhere on the first floor of the dungeon. The merchant tells him there is no way an item like that would be on the first floor to begin with, because someone would have already picked it up. It must be somewhere around the 50th floor of the dungeon, which no one has ever explored. There are 100 floors in total, but it is not a simple task to descend these floors since you must defeat each floor boss as you go. There is still a lot of stuff that remains unknown about the dungeon, but if Haruka intends to go down there, the merchant tells him that Haruka has to stock up on potions and recovery items, so Haruka runs off to do just that. But all the nerds were listening on Haruka's conversation, and as soon as they learn that Haruka is after the pheromone ring, they immediately go to the class rep to stop Haruka. Once class rep finds out about the pheromone ring, she and the other girls get really worried, because if Haruka ends up with something like that, they like him too much to say no to him. And then Haruka be able to do whatever he wants. No matter what, they have to make sure Haruka doesn't get that ring, so they all set out to stop him. After stocking up on supplies, Haruka was on his way to the dungeon, but all of a sudden, his perception skill alerted him to the presence of several people behind him, so Haruka turned around and found class rep and the entire class following up on him. Haruka stops and asks the class rep what everyone is doing here, but the class rep counters and asks Haruka what he is doing here today. Class rep tells Haruka she knows he is after the pheromone ring, but Haruka denies it and makes up a lie saying he is actually after the Solomon ring, a ring that would allow him to talk to animals, but no one is buying that. And since Haruka is not going to be able to convince them to leave him alone, so he just starts running away. Class rep and the rest of the class follow him into the dungeon, and Haruka may be ahead of them. But if class rep gets the pheromone ring before him, she would be able to force Haruka to obey her rules. And that would be really bad for his loner lifestyle, so Haruka starts sprinting again to create more distance. Class rep calls out to Haruka and says it is dangerous to run in the dungeon since he may fall into a trap. But Haruka says traps won't work on him since his luck stat is maxed out. The traps may not work, but poor construction is another thing entirely, because when Haruka puts his hand on the wall, it collapses, sending him into a near bottomless hole. Class rep tries reaching her hand out to save Haruka, but she is too late and Haruka falls into a deep hole. Haruka has been falling for a long time, and he doesn't know how to save himself. Eventually Haruka catches sight of the bottom of the hole, and that's when he comes up with an idea, so Haruka uses earth magic to turn the ground into a cushion and break his fall. With how long Haruka was falling, Haruka wondered if he somehow ended up on the 100th floor. It looked like there was only one path to follow, but Haruka already knew that tunnel would lead him to the dungeon's final boss, and he didn't want to deal with that, so Haruka starts thinking of ways to get out of here. Haruka recalls that he has the airwalk skill, and decides to use that to get out of here. But unfortunately, with how deep he fell, airwalk won't be able to get him out. Haruka has no choice left to head down the ominous path, but on the bright side, falling into that trap and ending up in an unfamiliar part of the dungeon allowed him to unlock two new skills: trap detection and spatial awareness. Haruka uses the skills to scope out the area, and thankfully there are no traps on the way to the boss's room. But Haruka finds something even worse, because it looks like he is actually on floor 101, so that means Haruka has to fight the hidden boss, and that is going to be an extra problem. Still, it is not like Haruka has much of a choice in the matter, so he begins making his way through the hall. The mana in the air is so dense that Haruka is having trouble breathing, but eventually Haruka arrives at the boss's room and opens the door. As soon as Haruka does this, a wave of mana rushes toward him, and he comes face to face with the secret boss of the Dungeon Emperor. Haruka knows this is going to be a tough battle, so Haruka uses his appraisal skill to see what he is up against, and to his horror, Haruka discovers that the Dungeon Emperor is level 100. Meanwhile, class rep and the rest of the class have been descending the dungeon in search of Haruka, but they have already reached the 47th floor and there is still no sign of him. The class is worried that he may have fallen to the bottom of the dungeon, but Shimazaki thinks Haruka could just use one of the portals that lead back up to the surface to escape. Unfortunately, Tatsuya explains that the portal only appears after you clear the floor boss, and they don't show at all if you skip the normal path, so there is no chance of Haruka finding one. Everyone knows that Haruka is tough, but the legend of this dungeon says that the Dungeon Emperor lies at the bottom, and even the Dungeon King is nothing compared to the Dungeon Emperor. The girls are starting to worry that they might not prepared well to rescue Haruka, since they don't have the equipment needed for such a deep dungeon dive. But class rep doesn't want to leave him down there, so everyone decides to keep moving forward and make it down as far as they can. Meanwhile, down in the boss room, Haruka is thinking about his options for fighting this thing. Haruka praises it, but he still can't see any of its skills, and the only information that shows up is that this thing is the Immortal King. Haruka knows liches are extremely powerful when it comes to using magic, meaning he can't afford to get into his range of attack, so instead Haruka decides to attack it up close. Haruka gets instantly behind the lich, and Haruka thinks he has the upper hand, but at the last second, the lich counters him with its sword, so this fight isn't going to be as easy as Haruka thought it would be. Outside the dungeon, Marielle and her father see dark clouds gather over the dungeon, and they know this must mean something really bad is going to happen. So her father tells her to go to the guild and instruct them to prepare in case of any emergencies that may arise. Back at Haruka, he is still thinking of a way to beat the Dungeon Emperor's godlike speed. So he decides to use all his speed boosting abilities at once to gain the upper hand. Haruka starts running fast, all across the room with the Emperor. But when Haruka strikes, he is still a step too slow, so Haruka has to try to go even faster. Haruka keeps striking at the Emperor and also refining his movements as he goes, but nothing Haruka has tried so far has allowed him to gain the edge over the Emperor, and he is just barely avoiding the Emperor's death blows, so Haruka can't keep going for much longer. Due to the intense battle, Haruka's contact lenses unlocked a new ability of foresight, so he is now able to see glimpses of the future. But even with a foresight warning, if Haruka lets his guard down for even a second, he is going to die. Haruka doesn't have many options here, so he resolves to just keep attacking like his life depends on it. After the fight has dragged on for quite a while, Haruka is starting to have fun, but at the same time, his body is not having fun because his knees give out and he starts panting heavily. All this fighting has completely drained his stamina and magic reserves, so Haruka is on the verge of losing consciousness. Meanwhile, the Dungeon Emperor looks like it's just getting started. Haruka forces himself to get back on his feet, but he can barely move, so if the Emperor attacks him now, he is done for. Only the Emperor isn't actually attacking him anymore. Haruka knew from the start the Dungeon Emperor was no ordinary monster, but now that he thinks about it, doesn't sense any bloodlust coming from it, not even a little bit. That means this thing hasn't been taking the fight seriously this entire time, and Haruka takes offense to that, so he gets up and charges at the Emperor one more time. But Haruka is still outmatched in speed and ends up with a sword to his neck. The Dungeon Emperor could have killed him right there, but it didn't, and Haruka doesn't understand why it doesn't want to finish him off. Just then Haruka notices that there is a lot of darkness swirling around the Dungeon Emperor, and it looks pretty sinister, so there is a possibility that the Dungeon Emperor is being forced to fight by the darkness. As Haruka realizes this, his staff starts glowing and absorbing the darkness, while he has no idea why his staff can do this. So Haruka just goes with it, and begins attacking to absorb all the darkness. After a couple of swings, Haruka manages to take out the concentration of darkness, and after it has all been absorbed, the Dungeon Emperor lowers its sword and just stands there. It looks like Haruka was right about it being forced to fight, and now he understands that the Dungeon Emperor has been looking for someone to put an end to its life, so it would be free from the control of the darkness. That is why it didn't finish Haruka off when it had the chance, because it hoped he would be the one to put an end to its suffering. Even though Haruka got rid of the darkness control of the Emperor, there is still a ton of darkness in the area, so sooner or later the Emperor is going to end up under the control of the darkness again, so Haruka needs to do something before that happens. At first Haruka considers killing the Emperor to get it over with, but he can't bring himself to do it, so Haruka just hugs the Emperor because of all the pain she has had to go through. Coincidentally, this activates Haruka's servitude skill. so the Emperor gets subjugated. And while Haruka didn't intend for this to happen, it works out great because the Emperor can't be controlled by the darkness if she is being controlled by Haruka. Haruka can't tell what the Emperor thinks of the current situation, so Haruka asks if she is mad that he subjugated her, but she shakes her head to tell him she is fine with it. Haruka is relieved to hear that, and this also confirms that she can understand him, so there shouldn't be much trouble communicating with her. Since now they are on friendly terms, Haruka decides to check the Emperor's stats to see if anything has changed, and it is his surprise that his level got reset to level 1, which must be a side effect of the subjugation. In addition, now Haruka can see the Emperor's name, so he finds out that her name is Angelica, and Haruka starts freaking out because it just dawned on him that the Emperor is a girl, so class rep is going to yell at him again if she finds out he subjugated her. There is no point in worrying about that right now, so Haruka asks Angelica if she would like to get out of here with him, and she agrees, so the two of them head through the door and arrive on the 100th floor of the dungeon. Haruka uses his spatial awareness skill to scan the area, and he located a staircase at the edge of the room which should lead out of there. But as Haruka and Angelica enter the room, they cause the floor boss to spawn in. Haruka is terrified because not only is he exhausted from his fight with Angelica, but the only reason he survived that fight was because Angelica wasn't trying to kill him, but at level 100, living armor boss definitely has murder on his mind. Haruka would like to get to the staircase without having to fight, but then he comes up with an idea to avoid the boss altogether. Haruka prepares his earth magic and uses it on the ceiling to cause it to collapse. He was planning to use air walk skill to climb through the hole, but then Haruka notices two minotaurs giving him a death glare. Just to make sure Haruka knows what he is getting into, Haruka appraises the monsters, and he is shocked to find out that they are level 99. It looks like Haruka just made matters worse for himself, because the minotaurs jump down to attack him as well, but luckily, they end up landing right on top of the living armor, so all three monsters lose a ton of health, and Haruka seizes the opportunity to finish them off. While Haruka is picking up the magic crystals, he notices that Angelica is looking at the leftover armor the monsters dropped, so Haruka tells her she can have it if Angelica wants. Angelica excitedly puts the armor on, but it is a little too bulky for her, so Haruka doesn't think it is going to be a good fit. However, the armor suddenly begins to glow and changes its form to fit Angelica perfectly. Haruka is relieved that it fits her so well since Angelica won't have her naked bones exposed anymore, but he is a little concerned since it is a set of magic armor they found in the dungeon, so Haruka says he is going to appraise it to make sure it is safe. But the armor is not safe at all. It has the curse of Bing on it, so now that Angelica has it on, she is never going to be able to take it off. Angelica gets mad that Haruka didn't warn her about this earlier, but she was already a skeleton, so it is not like she had many options for clothes anyway. Meanwhile, on the 50th floor, Haruka's classmates are still desperately looking for him. Everyone thinks this is pointless, since Haruka will probably just show up on his own and say something like he cleared the entire dungeon by himself. And while that sounds like something Haruka would do, class rep doesn't want to sit around and do nothing, so she leads everyone to the boss room so they can keep searching for him. But as soon as class rep opens it, they are all horrified to come face to face with a giant cyclops as the floor boss. Back in the city, Marielle arrives at the guild and informs the guild master that something strange is going on in the dungeon. While Marielle is not sure what it is, she is worried things might get out of hand. The guild master says hasn't received any reports from the guard he has stationed at the dungeon entrance, but Gatek reminds him that the guard that's stationed there is a bit unreliable, so they can't trust him to report anything important. They had better get themselves ready just in case something actually does happen. So Ofter says he is going to tell the guild members to prepare themselves. Speaking of preparing, the guild master asks where that group of new adventurers are, since they would be really useful right now. Neither Ofter nor Gatek have seen any of the classmates today, and it is normal for Haruka to disappear all the time. But if all the other are gone too, maybe something really is going on. On floor 98, Haruka has finally gotten Angelica to cheer up by giving her a cape to make her armor look nicer. But all of a sudden, Haruka senses a monster nearby, so he uses his appraisal to try and figure out what it is. Haruka discovers that the monster is a lich, and liches are immune to all physical attacks, so the only thing that would work on it is holy magic, and Haruka doesn't know how to use holy magic. Haruka contemplates trying to open a hole in the roof to get out of there without having to fight the lich, but Haruka doesn't know what crazy monster might fall through, so he can't risk doing that again. Haruka may not have holy magic, but his staff seemed pretty effective against the darkness. So Haruka tries his luck and pokes the lich with it until it eventually disappears. Haruka still doesn't understand how it works, but a win is a win. Haruka and Angelica continue climbing, and when they get to the 97th floor, they come face to face with a bunch of venomous moth monsters. Haruka doesn't want to fight the moths directly because the venom will probably kill him, so he decides to play it smart and creates a giant fireball to lure all the moths in before burning them into ash. Then both of them move up to the 96th floor, and this time they are faced with venomous caterpillars that spew really sticky string. Getting through here without getting stuck to the string on the floor would be difficult normally, but Haruka just decides to use earth magic to roll up the floor and squash all the caterpillars in the process. Things have been going well so far, but when Haruka and Angelica arrive on the 95th floor, something is clearly different compared to the other floors. The boss of this floor suddenly attacks them, and it is a living sword, but for some reason, its level is 100 instead of 95. The sword tries to slash Haruka, but he dodges out of the way and sneaks up behind it to counterattack. Unfortunately, the sword spots him before Haruka can land a hit and moves out of the way, so he is going to have to think of something else to stop it. The sword is moving in ways no human could ever match, and to make it worse, it has even got helper swords that can attack Haruka from all directions, so there is no way Haruka could even keep up with this thing. Just as Haruka says this, he realizes that there is someone here who is fast enough to keep up with the sword boss, so Haruka calls over to Angelica and asks her to help him. Angelica is more than happy to help, so she pulls out her sword and starts getting serious to take this thing down. The sword boss realizes that it is in deep trouble now, so it gets all its helper sword in formation and tries to block Angelica's attack, but as Angelica charges at it, she easily slices it in half with one swing. Haruka is shocked that Angelica is still so strong, since bosses usually get downgraded when they become allies, but with their combined strength, Haruka is sure the two of them will be able to get out of this dungeon in no time. Meanwhile, on the 50th floor, Haruka's classmates are fighting for their lives against the Cyclops, and they are losing. Several of them have already been injured, so if they take another hit from that thing, they are going to be done for. The guys are all wondering what Haruka would do in a situation like this, and it is not like he has ever given them good advice, but they know Haruka would never give up in a situation like this, so Kakazaki and Tatsuya come up with a plan together that might work. They pick the class rep off the ground and tell her their plans, but she is against the idea since it is way too dangerous. However, they don't have many options, so class rep agrees, and Kakazaki takes his position on the front lines to face the Cyclops. The Cyclops may be powerful, but it is slow, so Kakazaki thinks his acceleration skills should allow him to outpace it long enough to land a blow on its head. The girls in the class provide cover fire to keep the Cyclops distracted while Kakazaki approaches, but just as he is about to enter striking range, Cyclops uses his other hand to throw Kakazaki away like a bug. Kakazaki is disappointed in himself for failing to land a single hit on the Cyclops, but it is fine since this was all part of the plan. Kakazaki was just a decoy to keep the Cyclops distracted while Tatsuya got his attack ready. Once Kakazaki was out of the way, Tatsuya used his ability to snip the Cyclops through the eye. Meanwhile, Haruka and Angelica have just made it to the 85th floor, and the boss fights are getting a lot easier, but all of a sudden, they feel a tremor throughout the dungeon, and it seems like a dungeon stampede might be on the horizon. At the dungeon entrance, the idiot guard finally realizes that something might be off about this place since monsters are spawning all over the place, so he runs back to town as fast as he can to warn them. Everyone was already on high alert in case something like this happened, but now that they have confirmation that the stampede is on its way, the guild master is really worried. As the monsters close in on the city, he knows they're doomed because the stampede has big monsters in it. But everyone will have to put up one hell of a last fight. Ofter and Gatek are worried about Haruka's classmates since they are still in the dungeon right now, but there is nothing they can do to contact them now. The guild master remembers reading something about dungeon stampedes once before, so he pulls out an old scroll and informs everyone everything about the dungeons. Dungeons are essentially living things in this world, so when they grow to their 100th floor, all the extra monsters that spawn there have nowhere to go and end up spilling out onto the surface. The others ask if there is anything they can do to stop it from happening, so the guild master keeps reading, and according to the scroll, once the boss on the lowest level is killed, the dungeon will cease to exist, so all the stampeding monsters should vanish as a result. But defeating the final boss of a dungeon is no easy feat. Regardless, there is no way anyone in this room can pull that off, so the guild master tells Ofter to get all the civilians into a nearby shelter, and he tells Gatek to assemble all the available adventurers because he is not going down without a fight. Meanwhile, Haruka is still climbing out of the dungeon, and this floor has a bunch of griffins on it, so rather than fight them hand to hand, Haruka decides to poison some fish and let the griffins eat it until they end up passing out. That's yet another floor cleared, and it is becoming a lot easier for him the higher Haruka climbs, but on the other hand, Haruka's classmates are struggling with the lower floors. They are currently on the 54th floor and are still trying their best to move forward. so they can find Haruka, but they soon come across an entire horde of werewolves, and they don't look very friendly. Up on the surface, the adventurers are gathered outside the city gate, and they have just finished dealing with the first wave of monsters from the dungeon, but at this rate, there is no telling how long they will be able to last. As things stand, their only hope of getting through this is to defeat the dungeon boss. But they all know there is only one person capable of doing that, and that is Haruka. The guild master would like to send him a message down into the dungeon to call for Haruka's help. But the adventurers here need to stay and defend the city, so the guild master asks Marielle to go instead since she is pretty much doing nothing. Marielle is shocked and starts shaking her head because she doesn't want to go. But Haruka is much more likely to listen to a request from a pretty girl like her, so Marielle is the best option here. Although Marielle isn't much of a fighter, so sending her into the dungeon alone would be a death sentence, which is why the guild master asks Ofter to go with her. Ofter is fine with it, but he is worried about leaving his post since the town needs all the defense it can get. But the guild master assures him that the rest of them will keep the town safe until he returns. Ofter ends up agreeing, so he asks Marielle to hurry so they can get to the dungeon as soon as possible. But Marielle is still freaking out because she doesn't want to go into the dungeon. However, Marielle takes a look around and sees all the people who are injured and risking their lives for the sake of this city, so she gathers up all the courage she can muster and agrees to venture into the dungeon to find Haruka. Meanwhile, Haruka and Angelica have just made it to the 81st floor, and the entire floor looks like an aquarium. Haruka is so caught off guard by it that he doesn't notice that there are monsters in the water, and when the fish jump out and try to slice him up, Angelica is forced to step in and save him. Haruka apologizes for letting himself get distracted, but Angelica doesn't mind since she is having a lot of fun with him. Haruka takes a look in the water and notices that there are still a lot of fish swimming around in there, and if all those fishes attacked him at once, there is no way he would come out in one piece. First things first, Haruka has to find a way to deal with the speed of the fish, so he thinks to use ice magic to freeze the fish inside the water completely. Eventually, the fish get frozen and float to the surface, so Haruka's plan seems to have worked. Haruka keep doing the same thing as he Angelica cross the water, but then the floor boss shows up and sends a massive wave at Haruka and Angelica. Angelica quickly jumped out of the way in time, but Haruka just stood there as the wave closed in on him. Eventually Haruka gets hit and is plunged deep into the water floor, so it looks like Angelica is going to have to face the monster on her own. But a few seconds later Haruka emerges from the water with a surfboard made with earth magic, and he uses it to close in on the fish boss before landing a fatal blow in the middle of its head. Now the big fish has been taken care of, Haruka jumps over to the exit with Angelica and asks her if she is alright. Angelica tells him she is fine and Haruka is glad to hear it, so Haruka says they should keep moving. Haruka didn't really like it at first, but now he is starting to think this whole dungeon exploration thing is pretty fun, and with how strong he is, the bosses of the various floors aren't much of a threat to him anymore. As they continue to climb the dungeon floors, Haruka comes across several god-tier artifacts, like the Ring of Boundless Fortune, the Blessed Bengal, and a Necromancy Orb. All these things are really cool, and they are probably worth a lot of money, so Haruka can't decide whether he should keep them for himself or sell them for profit. Haruka thinks about it for a second, and all these blessed items won't do him much good since he already has maxed out luck, and he doesn't have a curse to get rid of. That is why Haruka decides to just give it all to Angelica, and while he is not sure if it will help or not, it should at least be able to bring Angelica good fortune in life even though she is forced to live her life cursed as a skeleton. Angelica is hesitant to take it at first since she doesn't want to take advantage of Haruka's kindness, but Haruka has no use for any of this stuff. After a bit of convincing, Haruka finally manages to get her to agree to take the items, and Angelica seems to be happy about it since this is the first time someone has ever given her a gift. Haruka doesn't understand why Angelica seems so happy, but he is glad she likes it, so Haruka suggests that they should keep going. Haruka doesn't realize it, but with all the blessed items he just gave, Angelica manages to break both the curse of the armor and the curse that turned her into a skeleton, so she gets her human form again, and Angelica starts to fall for Haruka, but she chooses to keep her broken curse as secret for now and runs after him. Up on the 54th floor, Haruka's classmates have just finished dealing with all the werewolves, and they are exhausted after all that fighting, but they have to keep going so they can find Haruka before something bad happens. Just then, they hear the sound of something approaching, and at first, everyone is worried that it might be a monster coming to attack them, but it turns out it is Marielle and Ofter. Back to Haruka, he and Angelica have just arrived on the 74th floor, but this might be their toughest floor because the entire place is engulfed in flames. They start walking through the floor, but with all the flames, it is hard for Haruka to keep track of his surroundings, so he accidentally trips over a rock and nearly falls face first into a bunch of flames, but luckily Angelica catches Haruka before he can get hurt. Since it would be dangerous for Haruka to continue walking in his current state, Angelica points to a safe area and suggests that he should rest there for a little while. Haruka wishes he could find a way to escape this heat and cool off even if it is just for a little bit, but then Haruka comes up with a really good idea. There was a small hole in the wall nearby, so Haruka used his wind magic to create a breeze to cool himself off in there. Coincidentally, the hole connects up to another hole that where class rep was standing next to, so she can hear Haruka's voice and begins yelling to get his attention. Haruka recognizes the class rep's voice and realizes this hole must be connected to the same one from where he fell at the start, so it is pretty lucky that Haruka found it. Class rep asks Haruka if there is any way he can climb up the hole to get to her, but Haruka already tried that earlier, so he is sure he won't be able to make a vertical climb with his airwalk skill. Haruka asked if class rep happened to have a rope she could throw down for him to use, but none of them had it. Haruka asks class rep what floor she is on right now, and when class rep tells him she is on the 54th floor, Haruka realizes he is not that far from her since Haruka is on the 74th floor, so if Haruka hurries, he should be able to make it up there in no time. Haruka is about to get up and leave, but class rep calls him back because there is something else she needs to tell him. Class rep informs Haruka that the city is being overrun with monsters, and it won't last much longer unless they stop the stampede. While Marielle and Ofter were on their way here, they saw the second wave of the stampede heading for the city. While the city has been holding out till now, if a third wave hits, there is no way it will survive. They tell Haruka that the only way to stop the stampede is to defeat the dungeon boss, but as soon as she mentions the dungeon boss, Haruka realizes they are referring to Angelica. Haruka tells class rep and the others that he already defeated the dungeon boss, and they are all amazed that he managed to do something like that, but if that is the case, then the stampede should have ended on its own. Ofter asks Haruka if he is sure he finished the boss because unless Haruka kills it, the stampede won't be stopped. This is a serious dilemma for Haruka since if he doesn't kill Angelica, the town will most likely end up destroyed, but is Haruka really willing to sacrifice her for the greater good? When Haruka first encountered Angelica, he was perfectly fine with the idea of killing her, but now Haruka knows that Angelica was held hostage by the darkness of the dungeon for countless years. He can't bring himself to kill her. Haruka tells them that he didn't kill the boss nor does he intend to. Haruka knows it may seem selfish, but he wants to find a way to save both Angelica and the town. Haruka says he might know a good way to save everyone from the stampede, but Haruka is going to need Angelica's help for the plan to work. Class rep has no idea what Haruka is planning, but if Haruka really believes he can make it work, then class rep is going to put her faith in him. Haruka may be a little reckless at times, but when it matters the most, Haruka always manages to pull through and keep everyone safe, so class rep is sure everything will be alright in the end. Haruka thanks her for having such confidence in him, and Haruka swears that no matter what, he will save everyone in town and free Angelica from this dungeon. The second wave of monsters is closing on Omui, and the adventurers gathered outside the city walls are doing their best to keep the monsters out. With the forces they have available right now, it will be very difficult to hold them off, but the guild master tells everyone to fight with everything they have got because they have to protect their home. Meanwhile, down in the dungeon, Haruka needs to hurry and get out of the dungeon before the city is destroyed, so he asks Angelica if they can go a little faster. Angelica doesn't mind, so the two start quickly running to clear the remaining floors. They soon arrived on the 73rd floor and they faced two lizard men, but without stopping, Haruka recalls that reptiles are weak to cold, so he casts some ice magic to freeze them in place and asks Angelica to smash them to pieces. The next floor has a bunch of scorpions inside, but Haruka just uses a bunch of smoke to disorient them so Angelica can land a finishing blow. The following floor has a giant hellhound as his boss, and Haruka doesn't really have any convenient magic to deal with it, so instead he throws a stink bomb straight into the hellhound's nose, which serves as enough distraction for Angelica to take it out. After the hellhound is taken care of, Haruka takes a moment to organize all the loot they have been gathering so far, and he thinks it might be a good idea just to combine everything together since it might help them get through the dungeon quicker. Although Haruka is a little disappointed that he still hasn't found the Fairman ring he came down here for in the first place. Haruka notices that Angelica looks a bit concerned by what he is doing, so Haruka tells her there is something he wants to try when they get back to town, but that is not what she is concerned about. Angelica thinks Haruka might be pushing himself a little too hard, so she wants him to rest a little. But while Haruka does feel exhausted, he can't afford to rest right now. Then the two head up to the 69th floor, and this floor seems to be a forest, but there is no sign of the boss yet. Just then, an owl resting on a nearby branch, so Haruka appraises it, and it says the owl is the boss of this floor. It is called a mesmer owl, so it probably has some sort of sleep ability, but before Haruka can take any action to prepare for its ability, the owl's eyes begin to glow, and it attempts to inflict the sleep effect on Haruka. Haruka's general health skills would normally negate all status effects inflicted on him, but it turns out that because Haruka was already pushing himself so hard, he was too tired for his skill to activate, so Haruka fell asleep almost instantly. A little while later, Haruka wakes up and finds Angelica carrying him on her back. While Haruka was asleep, Angelica took out the owl boss and picked him up so they could keep going, but even though Haruka was awake now, Angelica told him he should rest a little while she carried him. Meanwhile, Haruka's classmates were trying to clear a few extra floors so they could get to Haruka sooner. But then they ran into this level 100 Sphinx boss, and they were severely outmatched by it. None of their attacks do significant damage, and whatever minor damage they inflict is instantly healed. Ofter tells them that attacking this thing is pointless because he has read about it before, and Dungeon Sphinx can only be defeated by solving a puzzle. It is also immune to all kinds of attacks, making it pretty much immortal, so unless one of them is smart enough to figure out what the puzzle is, they are doomed. Haruka and Angelica have just made it to floor 59, since Angelica has been carrying him most of the way up. Haruka feels refreshed right now, but all of a sudden, his perception skill alerts him to something happening on the upper floor. Haruka knows it can't be good, so he rushes up as quickly as possible. Up on the 57th floor, Haruka's classmates are on the verge of giving up because there is no way for them to defeat this thing. All their magical and physical attacks are useless against it, and they don't even know what puzzle they would have to solve to beat it, so it's hopeless. While despairing over their current situation, Class Rep loses track of the boss, and by the time she realizes what's happening, it's about to stomp on her. Luckily, before Class Rep could be hurt, Haruka shows up, and he has already appraised the boss, so Haruka knows all about its immunity to attack damage. However, while Haruka was on his way down here, one of the items he picked up grants him the ability to negate all defenses, and that includes damage immunity, so after Haruka hits the boss to disable its defense, Angelica jumps in and finishes it off by slashing its head. Now that the boss has been defeated, and no one's in danger anymore, Haruka lands and greets everyone, saying he is finally back. Everyone is relieved to see him because if Haruka hadn't shown up they would be dead, but Class Rep is a little curious about the Lady Knight standing next to him. Haruka is about to explain everything that happened while he was stuck at the bottom of the dungeon, but all of a sudden, the floor beneath his feet collapses, and Haruka nearly falls back to the bottom floor. Luckily, after the first time this happened, Haruka learned to be more cautious about his surroundings, so he jumped back up using the falling rubble and returned to the floor. Haruka tells the others that there is no need to worry because he is not going to fall for the same trap twice, but it happens a third time, and Haruka isn't prepared for it. So he really is going to fall this time. However, Class Rep refuses to let that happen, so she jumps after Haruka to catch him before he falls. Class Rep has also learned from her previous failure, so this time she doesn't miss Haruka's hand and manages to pull him up in time. Everyone is relieved that Haruka didn't fall all the way down into the labyrinth again, but they don't have much time to celebrate because the next wave of the stampede is already on its way, and it's absolutely massive compared to the previous ones. If a wave of this size makes it to Omui, then the city cannot survive. Class Rep turns to Haruka and asks him if he has a plan to stop all these monsters. So Haruka confirms that he knows a way to stop the monsters and says Angelica is the key. However, they don't have enough time for Haruka to explain the entire plan, so Ofter tells everyone to head for the teleportation gate to get back to Omui as soon as possible. While they are running for the gate, Class Rep asks Haruka how he defeated all those powerful monsters and made it up here. Haruka tells her he probably couldn't have made it out through normal means, but with a little luck and ingenuity, even someone like him can make it out alive. Eventually the group makes it back to Omui and finds Gatek and the guild master sitting on the hill outside the city. They are glad to see their reinforcements have finally arrived, but then Marielle directs their attention to the huge horde of monsters approaching. Even Haruka wouldn't be capable of taking on this many monsters at once, so what little hope the guild master had is instantly destroyed. The entire city is shaken to its core by the footsteps of the army of monsters approaching, and the Lord of Omui is trying his best to calm all the people hiding in the church, so he tells them that he is sure the adventurers will save the city. Meanwhile, all the adventurers outside the city have pretty much given up because the scale of this stampede is simply too much. Haruka turns to Angelica and tells her to do what they discussed earlier, so she walks ahead of everyone else, draws her sword, and sticks it straight into the ground. A large amount of energy begins pouring out of her sword, and Haruka explains that Angelica may not be as she was when he fought her in the dungeon, but Angelica is still the Dungeon Emperor, so she holds absolute control over all the monsters from that dungeon. And as the Dungeon Emperor, Angelica has the power to get rid of each one of those monsters. As the wave of energy hits them, the monsters begin disappearing one after another until every single one of them is gone. Once the crisis has been averted, Haruka walks up to Angelica to congratulate her with a fist bump. It is a relief that all the monsters are gone, but all of Haruka's classmates are extremely confused and ask him how he did it. Haruka explains that he actually didn't do anything here, so they should be thanking Angelica. And once Haruka says this, Tatsuya figures out that Angelica must be the Dungeon Emperor. Upon hearing this, everyone asks if that means Angelica is a monster, but Haruka tells them there is no need to worry about Angelica hurting anyone because he spent a lot of time with her in the dungeon and Haruka knows Angelica is a nice person. They all find it hard to believe, but since Haruka says Angelica is safe, they take his word for it. Tatsuya still has some questions because from what he has read, the Dungeon Emperor is meant to be the most powerful being within the dungeon. Haruka calls Tatsuya creepy for knowing so much random information, but he is right about Angelica being the strongest in the dungeon. Even after her level got reset, Angelica was still incredibly strong as a fighter, so she was able to overpower all the monsters they fought in the dungeon. So Haruka figured she could probably use that power to command the monsters and get rid of them. However, what Angelica did only works on monsters from her dungeon, and they all have to be relatively close to her for it to work, so she wouldn't be able to stop an attack from a different dungeon if another stampede occurred at some point. While they are on the topic of what Angelica did, the girls ask if Angelica vaporized the monsters, but Haruka clarifies that the monsters are all still alive. All Angelica did was teleport them back and issue an order for them to stay inside the dungeon, but since it was the Dungeon Emperor who gave the order, Haruka was sure the monsters wouldn't be coming out anytime soon. And that means that the city of Omui will remain safe for the future. So everything can go back to normal now. The next day Haruka comes up with a good idea on how to use all the equipment he got from the dungeon, so Haruka spends some time organizing his inventory and asks the class rep to gather all their classmates. Once everyone arrives, they all see a bunch of treasure laid out on the tables in front of them, and it's all super rare and valuable, so they are really excited. Then Haruka announces that he is holding a super special sale for them, so they are free to pick out whatever they want, but they will still have to pay him for it. Both the boys and girls are ready to compete with each other for the best items, but once the sale actually begins, the girls go crazy with special sale and turn the sale into a battlefield. A bunch of the guys are too scared to go anywhere near them at this point, and Haruka feels a little bad for them, so he offers a special deal and pulls out a bunch of extra equipment Haruka wasn't planning on selling. After a while, everyone bought the stuff they wanted, and they all looked happy with their purchases, so Haruka was satisfied. The new gear should help keep his classmates safe, so the only thing left for him to worry about is what to do with Angelica. Angelica is going to be stuck in town with everyone for a while, but after being stuck in the dungeon by herself for so many years, Haruka gets the feeling she might not be used to socializing, so he is worried she might not get along with the rest of the girls. All of Haruka's classmates are still overjoyed by their amazing loot, and Haruka is equally happy because he has just made a lot of money selling the items. Haruka is still in the middle of counting all his money when a class rep comes up to him, so he hastily puts it all away and turns to ask her what she needs. Class rep says she wants Haruka to properly introduce her to Angelica, and tell her how he managed to become friends with her since she is the Dungeon Emperor. Class rep assumes Haruka must have used the pheromone ring to make Angelica like him, but Haruka tells her he never found the ring. Haruka admits that it was actually his servitude skill that turned Angelica into his companion, but then class rep starts yelling at him for using his servitude skill on another girl. Class rep demands to know how this happened, but Haruka really doesn't have an explanation to give, so instead, class rep decides to ask Angelica for the details and drags her off. Haruka is glad he doesn't have to deal with class reps yelling this time, but also worries about whether Angelica will be alright talking with her alone. Class rep gathers all the girls in one room so they can all listen to Angelica's story, but it is pretty awkward since Angelica hasn't said a word yet. Even so, the girls are still eager to learn about her, so class rep goes up to Angelica and asks her if she can tell them about herself, even if it is little by little. The girls eventually learn that Angelica is trapped in the deepest parts of the dungeon, but Haruka rescues her, and instead of killing her, Haruka uses his servitude skill to break the curse that had kept her trapped in the dungeon. After hearing all of this, class rep feels the need to do something special for Angelica, so she invites her to join all of them for a bath. At this point, everyone still believes Angelica is a skeleton, so when they start helping her to remove her armor, they are shocked to see such healthy thighs instead of skeleton bones. Meanwhile, back in Haruka's room, he is happy to sleep in his bed again, but he is a little disappointed that he never found the pheromone ring. On the bright side, Haruka's dungeon adventure raised his level 6 times and earned him many amazing new skills. But even with his increased stats, he never could have stopped the stampede. If it weren't for Angelica and others. If Haruka truly wants to live the life of a loner, then he has to be strong enough to fight on his own without relying on help from others, so Haruka thinks it's about time he heads back into the woods. The next morning, rather than sneak out of the city, Haruka decides to ask class rep if she's okay with him leaving for a while. And class rep doesn't seem to mind since nothing serious is going on in town right now. Still, class rep has more pressing matters on her mind because after what she saw yesterday, class rep realizes that Angelica is back to normal and she is hot. So she is a little worried that Angelica might steal Haruka away from her. Speaking of Angelica, Haruka asks her if she wants to come along with him since he is going into the woods, and Angelica happily agrees. A little while later, Haruka and Angelica make it out into the woods, and Haruka loves the fresh breeze since it has been so long since he was last here. Since they are out here, Haruka wants to practice a little with his new phase skill, so he asks Angelica if she thinks she can keep up with him, and Angelica nods in agreement. Haruka takes off running and practically teleports from one spot to another, but the incredible speed is still pretty hard for him to control, so he accidentally ends up falling off the side of the cliff. Fortunately, all the falls Haruka took in the dungeon have taught him to always be prepared, so he safely lands on his feet. Angelica soon catches up to him, so she peeks over the edge of the cliff to make sure Haruka is alright, but Angelica fails to notice the slippery mushrooms on the cliff's edge, so she ends up falling off as well. Luckily, Haruka manages to catch her, and he is glad Angelica is alright, but Haruka is surprised at how heavy she is for a skeleton, and Angelica is pretty much dying of embarrassment in Haruka's arms. Later that night, Haruka brings Angelica back to his house and heads to the bathroom to enjoy a nice, relaxing bath in the tub. Haruka even jokingly offers to let Angelica join him in here. But Angelica didn't realize the offer was a joke, so she took him up on his offer and walked into the bathroom. Haruka is surprised that Angelica actually wants to take a bath with him, and he is even more shocked when Haruka sees a beautiful blonde girl standing there instead of his skeleton. Haruka stands up, completely forgetting that he is not wearing a towel, and asks if the girl is really the same Angelica he knows. Angelica confirms it, so Haruka gets out of the bath and says they need to talk. The two of them both take a seat on Haruka's bed, and he has a lot of questions to ask, but first, Haruka wants to know if Angelica can talk now. Since Angelica is human again, she does have vocal cords, but Angelica hasn't talked for so long that she doesn't remember how to, so instead, Angelica uses various hand signs to explain how she ended up like this. As the Dungeon Emperor, Angelica was reduced to nothing but a skeleton, but when Angelica put on that living armor and had a curse that made it bind to the user's flesh, the armor restored Angelica's flesh. And then, Haruka gave her a blessed bangle which negated the armor's curse of binding. Additionally, the necromantic orb and the pilgrim's ring restored her life force and autonomy, so all these overlapping effects turned her back into a regular human. Haruka is basically responsible for returning her humanity, so Angelica has been helping him as her way of saying thanks. Haruka appreciates that Angelica wants to repay him, but he feels like he might be robbing her freedom like this, so Haruka tells Angelica doesn't need to stick around him anymore if she doesn't want to. Haruka wants Angelica to know that she is free to do whatever she wants, but Angelica refuses to leave Haruka's side because what she wants is to stay with him. Haruka realizes that Angelica doesn't want to be alone, so he decides to stay with her a little longer, and to cheer her up, Haruka asks if Angelica wants to hear a fun story. From there, Haruka spent the entire night talking about whatever came to mind, and Angelica enjoyed listening to him. The next morning, Haruka and Angelica head out, and Haruka asks Angelica if she would like to have a little training match with him. Angelica isn't opposed to the idea, but she wonders why he suddenly wants to fight, so Haruka explains that he has been working on a new skill recently, and Haruka wants to test it out to see how much he has improved over the last couple of days. Angelica agrees to help him practice, so the two of them face off against each other, and Haruka already knows Angelica was holding back against him when they fought in the dungeon. so now that Haruka asked her to go all out against him, he is sure Angelica will be a lot faster than before. However, Haruka intends to use his new phase skill to overcome the speed gap, so as the match begins, Angelica charges forward, and Haruka uses the phase skill to evade her initial strikes. Haruka jumps back to create some distance and prepares himself for a counterattack, so he rushes towards Angelica and tries hitting her with his staff. But she blocks it and hits Haruka on the head instead. Haruka falls to the ground in defeat, and Angelica comes over to check if he is alright. However, aside from the pain of his loss, Haruka is perfectly fine. Haruka may not have been able to outpace Angelica this time, but he is starting to get the hang of the phase skill, so Haruka is sure he will surpass Angelica's speed someday. But for now, all this training has worked up his appetite, so Haruka asks Angelica if she wants to eat something with him. Angelica nods in agreement, so Haruka takes her to the river and shows her how he catches fish with his lightning skill. After gathering all the fish, Haruka puts them in a basket, and the two start walking home so they can prepare it. But Haruka is getting sick of grilling the fish all the time, so he suggests they should make a hot pot instead. When they get home, Haruka starts working in the kitchen, and Angelica wants to help too. But she has never used a kitchen knife before, so Haruka gets behind her to guide her. Angelica seems to be enjoying it, since she gets to spend quality time with Haruka. Once the meal is finally ready, it looks amazing, so Haruka and Angelica start eating. And after they are both done eating, Haruka is stuffed. However, Angelica seems a little anxious, so Haruka asks her if there is something on her mind. Angelica is too embarrassed to say anything, so she grabs Haruka's hand and drags him to the bedroom before asking him to take a seat next to her. Haruka is still a little confused about what's going on, but he sits down as she says. However, Angelica moves closer and goes behind him, so this can only mean one of two things. Angelica is way too innocent for the second option, so Haruka correctly guesses that she just wants to give him a normal massage, and Angelica confirms it, explaining she wants to show her gratitude for everything he has done for her. Since Angelica wants to, so Haruka agrees to let her give him a massage. But Angelica is bad at giving massages. With every touch, Haruka could hear bones crack, and not in a good way. But Angelica is trying her best, so Haruka pretends she did a great job. Even though Angelica has already massaged Haruka, she still wants to do something else for him, so Angelica asks if Haruka wants anything. Since Angelica is offering, Haruka asks her to come outside with him for a bit. Outside, the two of them sit on a bench to look up at the stars, but Angelica is feeling a little embarrassed, so she is keeping her distance from Haruka. Haruka says Angelica doesn't have to sit so far away from him and gives her a head pat, but that makes her even more embarrassed, so she backs away from him. Angelica wants to convey her feelings properly to him, so she tries her best to say the words, but Angelica is still having trouble speaking, so she turns away in shame. Haruka says Angelica doesn't have to push herself so hard because he knows she is trying her best to progress. If Angelica wants to improve her communication skills, Haruka can't drag her into his loner lifestyle, so he suggests they should head back to the city tomorrow. The next day, Haruka and Angelica are walking back, but suddenly, it starts raining, so Haruka grabs Angelica's hand and pulls her along so they can run through the rain before they get wet. Angelica and Haruka finally return to town, and all the girls are excited to see them again. But they are even more excited about Haruka and Angelica's relationship since they hold hands. Haruka and Angelica realize what they are doing and immediately become embarrassed and let go, but it is too late since all the girls have already seen it, so they swarm around Angelica and start asking all kinds of details about the time she spent with Haruka. Angelica is a little overwhelmed, so the class rep blows her whistle to break it up and officially welcomes Angelica back. Haruka thanks the class rep for looking after Angelica and says he will count on her from now on. While Angelica may not be surrounded anymore, the guys start hassling Haruka and asking him for all the details of his date with her, so Haruka yells at them until they leave. Just then, Angelica comes over to Haruka, and she seems nervous because Angelica wants to say something. Haruka listens to Angelica's first word to thank him for everything he has done for her, and Haruka couldn't be more proud of her. Since coming to this world, Haruka has realized that everyone has their own struggles to deal with, and in a sense that means they are all loners in their own way. However, they all have each other to rely on, so he can rest assured that they will be alright. Which means Haruka can continue to master this world alone. This is the end of the series. Before we wrap up, we have recently launched a membership program. Through this program, you can enjoy perks like early video access, exclusive content for members, and many more to enhance your interactions. If you are interested, consider joining our membership. To enjoy these benefits, check out the link in the description to enter. So friends, if you enjoyed our recap video, please like and share it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.